Powhatan Point, Ohio, the industrial heartland of the United States, often referred to as the Rust Belt. A fellow named Pete Anderson is on his way to meet a hunting friend whose name is Marvin Brown. They have a meeting set up at his hunting camp because he and Brown own some cattle together, and they've agreed to slaughter a few of them and divide up the meat. This meeting is to decide who gets what out of these slaughtered cattle.
Hey, Marvin, it's Pete. Marvin. Marvin?
Marvin Brown is face down on the floor.
Marvin, I need some help getting this stuff in from the truck.
Pete looks at him from a distance and says, "Very funny, Marvin. You want to look like you're dead?"
Marvin?
And then he walks up to him and looks closer. Checks his pulse, finds none. Powhatan Point is so small that violent death is a rare thing indeed. Marvin Brown's been there all his life, and he'll be there for his death, too. I spent my career closing murder cases. But I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
My name's Ryan Aller. I'm a detective with the Belmont County Sheriff's Office. I've been working homicide cases for 15 years. The day I got the call, I was at home sick. I hadn't taken a sick day in probably 10 years.
Aller.
We don't get a lot of homicide calls. So when I got this call, I had to respond. It's all hands on deck.
So what are we looking at?
Gunshot. Close range from the looks of it.
When I arrived, I was briefed by Detective Rusty Lucy.
I told Ryan there was no forced entry, there was no windows broken out, nothing seemed to be ransacked. We had a male who was laying face down, appeared to be shot in the back.
Position of the body tells us as investigators that the shooter was behind the person. Was it a interrupted burglary? Was it someone that the victim knew that they felt comfortable turning their back on?
We discovered his wallet with his ID. The victim has cash on him, which makes us believe that this wasn't some type of breaking and entering or home invasion type scenario.
It did not take us very long to ID the victim at all. The victim used to be the mayor several years ago of Powhatan.
Yeah, that's the mayor, all right. Damn.
Marvin Brown was a very popular person in the community.
Look up at me one more time. There we go.
Marvin Brown had been mayor for a couple of years in Powhatan. He was a big, hearty, husky character. He would help anybody who needed it, but he wouldn't take any nonsense.
When Chief Investigator Aller realizes the identity of that victim, he certainly knows this is going to be different. Murder is ugly, but high-profile murder is infinitely worse. It draws the maximum attention of the press and the public. It makes a very difficult investigation.
There was no weapon found anywhere near the body or anywhere near the scene in general. In the bedroom, next to the bed, was a blanket.
And then near the living room area, we discovered a 9mm shell casing. But our main concern was, where's the bullet?
They see evidence of ricochet off a wall, but they don't find a slug. They think that's very odd.
The bullet must have been pretty easy to see for the killer to take it. Because if they would have took the time to really look for it, they would have took the casing as well. That bullet must have been glowing.
The big question is always why? Why is this gentleman laying in his hunting cabin, shot in his back?
The family gathered at Marvin's residence, and we needed to start talking to them.
One of the worst things I did in my entire career is make death notifications, and it is absolutely the most horrible thing you can imagine.
It was a pretty big shock for the family.
Detective Waller said that there was foul play, that somebody shot him.
I was so upset and mad that somebody did that to him. Shot him in the back. You're going to get me crying. My dad was a tough guy. He was 70 years old and you still couldn't keep up with him. He was very healthy. He came back from the Army and Dad was a union leader down at the steel mill where he worked at for about 30 years.
At the time when the mill started closing down, he was resilient. It's like, I got to find something else, and that's what he did.
Marvin is a wealthy man. He owns an extremely successful contracting business.
He ran for mayor for a number of reasons. My dad was a leader, and that's what he always stressed all our life, be a leader.
Even though Marvin hadn't been the mayor for 20 years, everybody called him the mayor. Marvin was a force of nature in that small town.
A lot of people, when he walk into someplace, they go, hey, Mayor, just messing with him.
I know this has been extremely distressing for all of you, but I do need to speak to Mrs. Brown.
Aller is also aware that Marvin Brown has a second wife. The new wife's name is Deborah, who he's been married to for 10 years.
He absolutely loved Deb. Always a happy marriage.
Deborah works with Marvin in the business. She is his bookkeeper. She's responsible for the payment of bills and payroll and that sort of thing. Marvin and Deborah are partners in business as well as in life. They make a great team. She has a daughter. Her daughter's name is Meredith, and this daughter is pregnant. Meredith is not Marvin Brown's child. She's his stepchild, but he treats her as if she is his own.
Dad loved all his stepchildren, and he was especially close to Meredith because she was youngest.
I mean, it was a pretty stressful night. Deborah Brown had taken her daughter, Meredith, to the hospital because of the problems with her pregnancy.
So the sons are there, but mom and daughter are not. Marvin Brown's stepdaughter, Meredith, is having pregnancy issues, probably as a result of this shocking murder. So her mother has decided to take her to the hospital to be evaluated.
Can you walk me through where you've been today?
The first idea is to establish alibis. What was everybody doing the day Marvin died? So they determined that the sons are all at work. Deborah and her daughter Meredith are shopping for baby furniture for the new arrival. They have no opportunity to commit the offense.
Thank you.
Aller's task is to have this crime scene speak to him in some way and tell him what can be learned.
The way we viewed everything on scene, it was pretty apparent that somebody had snuck up on this victim.
You immediately begin looking at the individual who made the call, and that's Pete Anderson.
The 911 caller was a friend of Marvin's. A lot of times, it turns out the people that called 911 had something to do with the death.
He was in from out of town. It was just very odd that he was there during this instance.
What are you doing here, Pete Anderson? How long have you been here? Did you kill and then make the call as if you discovered him? That's entirely possible. Pete Anderson is now in an interrogation room at the police department, as he is the one who is present when the police arrive with Marvin Brown dead on the floor in front of them.
We just want to make sure you're not involved in his death in any way.
Sure, I understand.
This person supplied us with their movements and receipts, and through ATM cameras, we proved 100% he definitely was not anywhere near Belmont County when Marvin was shot. We were able to rule him out as a suspect almost immediately.
In homicide investigations, the expression is you run the wickets. You do what is obvious first, and what is next obvious next, and so on. And that's what they've done with Pete Anderson.
All right, thank you for your time.
So the next step is for Rusty and Aller to go to the coroner and have him tell them about this gunshot wound.
Mr. Brown was shot through the upper to mid portion of the right back. Without some kind of contraption set up to hold a gun and shoot himself, it's almost impossible for this to be a suicide. He didn't have what we call defense wounds on the hands and forearms, so it appears that he was not involved in an assault or a fight situation, and that he was quite surprised from behind.
The shooter took advantage of the situation. He's there to kill Marvin Brown, and rather than confront him, he just shoots him in the back.
Mr. Brown was in very good health for his age. His heart was normal shape and size. I would have expected him to live another decade or two if this trauma did not happen to him.
The day after Marvin was killed, I was just interviewing family and friends all day long. We interviewed Deborah Brown, Marvin's wife.
Then he took that opportunity to ask a few more questions.
Can you think of anyone that might have had a grudge against Marvin?
Marvin is widely known as someone not to be trifled with. He has a long history, and long histories can come back to haunt you.
There was this one thing that happened a few weeks ago, but we didn't think anything about it at the time.
One of the things we were told by Deb was that Marvin had had a crossbow stolen from his cabin.
Deborah recalls that there's a guy named Rex Jocelyn who apparently had stolen a crossbow that Marvin used for hunting.
Marvin went out, and when he came back, he had the crossbow. but he never told us what had happened.
So she assumed that they had a confrontation of some sort. Is that enough to kill for her? What if his manhood was insulted because he got his ass handed to him by a 72-year-old man? That certainly would do it, now wouldn't it?
When we learned about this crossbow being stolen, we definitely had a possible motive for Marvin's death. It was the best one we had.
So we need to have a conversation with Mr. Joslin and find out where he acquired his taste in crossbows.
I'm Detective Aller with the Belmont County Sheriff's Office.
We'd like to ask you a few questions.
I was able to get a timeline for the whole day. And confirm with this person's foreman and prove that they were nowhere near when Marvin was killed.
The frustrating thing about homicide investigation is 90% of the time, you're pursuing things that turn out to be nothing. You still have to run the Wickets. Several more weeks pass, and Chief Investigator Aller is in the same boat he's been in. He's eliminated 2 suspects. He's established a solid alibi for all 5 of the current family members. And he doesn't have a hell of a lot else.
Tell you what, on this case, from day one, this is definitely going to be a long haul.
In Powhatan, people would look right at me and say, I hope they get who did this. This left a void in Powhatan.
Pretty much right off the bat, Marvin's sons, they wanted to help. One of the things that they talked about was, should we post a reward?
And he said, if we dry up, let's do it then.
It's not something that we in law enforcement recommend right off the get-go.
Money complicates everything, and it complicates the truthfulness of humans. People will say anything to get their hands on money. They will point the finger at their own mother.
But enough time had passed. I said, I think now's the time to go forward with your guys' idea of putting a reward out.
I think we started off at $10,000 and we ended up raising it to $50,000 by the end.
$50,000 is a lot of money for anybody, let alone somebody in Powhatan Point. Aller's phones light up in headquarters. Everybody and his brother calls in, who absolutely knows who's responsible for this case, for killing Cock Robin and starting the Second World War, if they will just give them the 50 grand. It's been weeks, and Aller has nothing of substance, and there is no worse feeling in the world.
There's a crippling little voice in the back of my head saying it's never going to close.
He is feeling the fear that creeps in of not solving something. I've had that fear. It's horrible. You don't sleep. You are consumed by it. Aller is wading through this mess of people. He finds one. And it's interesting when you find one like this. You just feel it in your bones. A woman calls. The woman's name is Hattie Connor. She reports that she is friends with Meredith.
Hattie Connor gave us our first real break on this case.
Meredith called her and asked her to do her a favor. Marvin's accountant wanted to speak to Marvin suddenly about a concern he had about missing funds from the bank accounts. And Meredith wanted her friend Hattie to call Marvin Brown and pretend to be from the accountant's office so that that meeting could be postponed. Well, how would Meredith know that Marvin's accountant was trying to get a hold of him in the first place? Because Meredith's mother, Deborah, is Marvin Brown's bookkeeper.
Meredith said that her mother needed some time to deal with something.
So, she wanted you to call Marvin Brown and pretend you're from the accountant's office?
Hattie Connor says her mother was in the room, and Mom said, that doesn't sound right. And so she didn't. She never did make that call.
We had to ask ourselves, how much is Meredith involved in all this?
And Aller said, oh my, Hattie, your mother was right. Thank you very much. The old expression applies. When in doubt, follow the money, and it will lead you to the truth.
Thank you.
So Aller is finally getting somewhere. He's got something to chew on. Doesn't prove anything, but it certainly puts him in the ballpark.
As far as looking at the finances of Marvin's company, if you're trying to get a person to pretend to be an accountant, to dismiss an appointment, to keep the owner of the company away from something, this guy just got murdered.
Why would Meredith want to stop this meeting? Is she somehow involved in all of this? That's the question. The answer is to start following Meredith around. So they put an undercover cop on her tail.
Our investigation showed that Meredith had a drug habit. She had a very large pill problem. She was involved with multiple people that were known drug dealers.
So now this cop starts asking questions around town about sweet little Meredith.
At the time, Meredith was an attractive girl.
People were telling us that she used drugs and she manipulated men through sex for drugs and money. No one had anything good to say about Meredith. Everything we learned about her was more suspicious as time went on.
Aller knows he's onto something, but he's not exactly sure what. Meredith had been shopping for baby furniture the whole time and has an ironclad alibi for the moment the murder happened. What he does know is that Meredith is living far from an average life, and she has a habit that she needs to feed. Not only that, but he knows that she tried to trick Marvin into missing a meeting with an accountant. But the question is, why would Meredith want Marvin dead?
The next step was to learn more about the financial stuff. We identified Marvin's accountant and reached out to that person. We learned that finances were not good. The money was screwed up. Deb had not filed a tax return for several years.
So what are you up to, Deborah?
Thank you very much for your time.
Through search warrants and court orders, we obtained all the financial records from Marvin and Deb's bank accounts. There was a probate hearing where Deb was ordered to turn over the accounting records that she was in charge of. I was given those, and I'm looking, I'm like, whoa, wow, whoa. I mean, it was, to a layperson like myself, no problem seeing that these are two different sets of books. The books that she turned in, they were fake.
Aller looks at withdrawals made by Deborah from ATM machines in cash, thousands upon thousands of dollars. When you're a homicide detective, you have to become a priest, a marriage counselor, a psychiatrist. One of the things he's had to become is an amateur accountant. Deborah is covered in a cloud of suspicion. So then the question becomes, all right, Deborah, let's say you're a thief. So where's the money?
Deb doesn't appear to be someone that's living large. You're someone that's stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're driving a brand new car, fancy vacations, things like that.
The subject's on the move. I'm following.
What are you up to, Deborah? What exactly do you need the money for? Now it becomes more than a pursuit of the money. It becomes a pursuit of what you did with it.
In talking to different confidential informants in the Powhatan area, we learned not only Meredith had a bad prescription pill problem, Deborah did as well.
And when we come to find out, Deb's putting down $500 to $700 a day for pills for her and Meredith.
Both Deborah and Meredith are drug users. That's where the money goes. it goes to narcotics, as it always does.
On top of that, she's got a huge gambling problem. So she's popping pills, spending this money all day long. When she's out of it, she goes out to the ATM and takes $500–700 out all day, every day. You'd look at a withdrawal for, let's say, $500 from an ATM right next to her favorite gambling parlor. I mean, she literally deleted that transaction from the books that she had turned into the court.
The most dangerous machine in the casino is the ATM. Deborah's taking $500 hits in the ATM machine that's located across the street from her favorite casino. How convenient. In light of this new information, things appear a little different. The detectives begin to reassess the behavior of the widow, starting with the day of the murder.
I remember that day. One thing that stood out is Deb kind of just took off. We had learned that Meredith was having some pregnancy issues. I thought it was very weird. There were multiple other family members that could have took her. This is her husband laying murdered. She just kind of takes off.
So now Aller develops a new theory of the case. Mom and daughter have a great alibi, but they have the right companions, ones that will kill for money. 6 months since this investigation gets underway. So now we know that this mother-daughter team, Marvin Brown's wife and stepdaughter, had been robbing him blind for years, and they were about to be found out. When Marvin discovers their thievery, their life is going to change dramatically for the worse. Well, they can't have that. They have a good alibi, but they certainly know the right people. Perhaps one of them would take care of this problem by removing Marvin Brown from the planet.
Here's Deb. She's stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's about to get found out. And then this guy ends up dead 2 weeks later. We didn't have enough to charge Deb with a murder at this point. But she's stealing money, she's making fake books. So we applied and got a search warrant for Deb's house. You never know what you're gonna come across in these types of searches. We found something very interesting.
Mrs. Brown, we'd like to take a look inside the safe.
It was in a gun safe. Deb had the combination to it. We found a box for a compact 9mm pistol.
Ms. Brown, do you have any idea where the gun is for this box?
Where is the gun, Deborah? I don't know. I haven't seen it since my husband bought it. Now, is it possible that Deborah's lying? Well, that's the question.
And it had the serial number of the pistol on it. And we were able to trace that back and find out who sold it. This gentleman, he actually remembered the transaction, and he's pretty sure that Marvin said that he bought it for his wife. And at this point, we talked to all Marvin's family and friends.
Just a lot of anger because my dad loved Deb to death. He trusted her with everything. Her kids, same way. And that's what really pissed me and my brothers off, because my dad gave them everything they had.
By this time, I could also talk to the accountant because, you know, I was fiduciary. As soon as I received my fiduciary papers, me and my wife went to the bank and had them print out the last 6 months of transactions. My wife was in the car, and I handed her half of them, and I started looking at them, and she started crying almost immediately. It was just pages and pages of $500 ATM withdrawals.
Marvin Brown's 3 sons are devastated by the loss of their father and by the involvement of the only person he really cared about, his wife, Deb. They cannot understand why Deb and her daughter Meredith would do such a terrible thing. The reason they can't understand it is they're not low-life drug addicts, and they can't achieve that level of depravity because they've never experienced it.
Detective Aller asked if Dad was a guy that had a lot of handguns and pistols, and Dad wasn't a handgun guy.
No one ever known him to own a 9mm. So finding out that he bought one and that his wife had access to it and it's missing was huge for us.
Now he has a set of cooked books. He has an empty gun box of the correct weapon made by the correct company. And all fingers point at Deborah Brown.
She was at that point interviewed about the financial crimes. She knew we had her cold for all the financial stuff, so she admitted to taking the money for the drugs and the gambling and whatnot and hiding it from Marvin. But she held fast on not knowing anything about the murder. We could tie her to the embezzlement, but to put her directly in the murder in a court of law, we weren't there yet.
Stand up. Deborah Brown, I am arresting you on suspicion of fraud.
Aller is absolutely convinced that Deb and her daughter Meredith are the masterminds behind this death. But Aller can't prove it. He can't put a gun in their hand. He can't put them at the scene. He has no evidence to support it. So Aller decides the best pathway to that information is to start arresting the associates of Deborah and Meredith for sale and transactions in narcotics to see what they can tell him.
We descended upon all criminal associates of Deb and Meredith we could think of. We squeezed them hard. And we ended up busting several of Meredith's drug dealer boyfriends for trafficking drugs. We want information. We want help.
They arrest a number of these people, but they tell them nothing. But there's one guy whose name keeps coming up again and again, and his name is Stephen Moore.
You should talk to Stephen Moore. That guy hangs around Meredith all the time.
Stephen Moore's a resident of Powhatan. He's well known to the sheriff's office, extremely long criminal history for theft and drug offenses. Moore had been involved with Meredith for several years. We definitely started looking at Moore for being involved in this homicide. This whole operation was our last shot, and we had to do it just right.
Hey, what's up, man?
An officer spent about a year working on this and was finally able to get into Stephen's circle and started purchasing drugs on a fairly regular basis off Stephen. But finally, we executed a search warrant at Stephen's house. And right then and there, I told him, "You're done solid on this drug case, and I want to talk to you about Marvin Brown."
Tell me what happened, Stephen.
Okay, so here's it. I want to help you out.
Stephen said, "Hey, yeah, I do. I do want to talk." And at first, I'm like, I just can't believe, because the whole time on this case, you know, I'm like the dog that gets kicked. But finally, it's starting to happen.
Stephen is surrounded by demons. Stephen has to stop feeling this way. If you don't kill every day, the guilt eats at you. You begin to see the victim in people's faces. You begin to see all sorts of demons come out of the darkness because you're a murderer.
I need help. I need help to get to the people that put this into motion. I knew you killed Marvin. I want you to tell me the truth.
Marvin noticed that there was something, and he had an appointment with the accountant, and there was money that wasn't there or something. And he found out about it, and he was supposed to, I don't know. That's why she wanted somebody to cancel the appointment. Reschedule it.
Reschedule? Why did she want to reschedule it? Did she tell you?
And to give them more time to get what they wanted to do.
Which was what?
I guess have him taken care of.
Right off the bat, Stephen was talking about the accountant. Stephen said Meredith planned to have the accountant called by someone else to give Meredith and Deb time to plan the murder of Marvin.
Their mom would pay somebody if they could get rid of this. And
get rid of what?
Him. Kill him? Yeah.
And then, as he's telling me everything, all this guilty knowledge starts leaking out.
But I know you had a weapon. What kind of weapon did you have?
I think it was a high point.
A high
9mm.
So who gave you that gun?
Meredith.
You got a guy, and you're telling him you're screwed unless you cooperate with me. That could still be viewed as you're making someone tell you what you want to hear. You don't want that in an interrogation room. You want the truth. So there's lots of things we build into these interviews to make sure that the person that's confessing to us has guilty knowledge.
Stephen lays this out chapter and verse. He matches every fact of the crime scene, including a weapon, all the right things. It's him, without doubt.
You're not a killer. I know killers. You're not one of them. You did this. And it wasn't you. Someone made you do this. Don't let her win, Stephen. Tell me what happened.
You shot Marvin Brown.
Stephen, who shot Marvin Brown?
Me.
And eventually, he owed up the fact that he was the one that shot Marvin.
Stephen tells Aller that Deborah gave him $12,000 to kill Marvin Brown.
You call me when it's done.
He was given a high point 9mm, the same model that's missing from Marvin's house, that we never released to a soul. It was slapped in his hand by Deb and Meredith, along with a bag of pills and $2,000 down. Kill Marvin, and then we'll give you another $10,000.
Stephen tells Aller in his confession that Meredith told him when he should be at the cabin because she had set up her alibi to be furniture shopping for the baby. Stephen was in the cabin before Brown arrived.
Okay. Where were you?
Over here under a blanket.
And was hiding under a blanket next to the bed.
Back to the crime scene. Right next to that bed was a blanket, just like he said. No one knew that. No one knew that. But you had to been at that crime scene. And I'm at this point, I'm just like, oh, tell me more, Stephen, tell me more. I walked up behind him and I shot him right in the back. I saw a bullet, I picked up the bullet, and I left. I said, why did you take the shell casing? He says, I didn't see it.
Stephen, the genius, says, I didn't see it. Oh, okay. I forgot you're a moron, Stephen. That's probably my fault.
Stand up for me, please. Stop right there. Place your arms behind your back.
So Aller now has what he needs, a detailed confession of how this crime occurred, and it was planned by Deborah and Meredith. That certainly should do it, but somehow, maybe it's just not going to.
It was 5 years before it came to a conclusion. The prosecutor and the assistant prosecutor who ran this case wanted to be very cautious.
When you are asking a jury to believe a witness, you must be able to convince a jury that this person is credible, that their information is reliable, and they certainly can't do that with Stephen Moore.
Stephen Moore's stories began to change on such a level that using him as a witness was not ever going to be possible in a court of law.
Stephen is an unreliable witness. He does not have a specific way to prove he ever received $12,000 from anyone. So in the opinion of the district attorney, none of that adds up to clear and convincing. March 20th, 2015, Deborah Brown pleads guilty to theft and tampering with evidence. She serves 3 years in prison for these crimes. She's released, and a few months later, she dies of cancer and has to answer to a higher authority. And exactly 3 years later, March the 19th of 2018, Meredith is arrested.
But we were able to get an arrest warrant for Meredith based off of Stephen's confession. At that point, she had moved. She was in West Virginia. We had to supply West Virginia with the warrant affidavit. Somehow, my affidavit ended up in the hands of a local news media. When it became public record and was on the 5 o'clock news, it's ruined. Meredith was indicted for other crimes. She was not indicted for the homicide.
Meredith was convicted of obstruction of justice and is sentenced to 2 years home confinement. Neither woman was charged with murder. Stephen, on the other hand, decides to plead guilty to first-degree murder in the death of Marvin Brown. He is sentenced to life in prison plus 17 years in the state of Ohio, where he remains today.
Well, I lost hundreds of hours of sleep over this case. From 2013 to 2018, it's an eternity to work a murder case.
I think people still feel that not everyone who had a hand in it has been brought to justice.
Just a disappointment of Deborah and Meredith getting away. I would gladly let Stephen walk away to watch them two go to prison the rest of their life.
There's so many things that, both of our, Chris and myself and my brother Mike, I mean, our kids have done a lot to be proud of, and my dad would have. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Aller didn't get all that he wanted. You stay on a case after a million dead ends because you took an oath to be the voice of someone whose voice has been silenced. That's what you said you'd do. And if you said it, you better have meant it. Everybody I know meant it.
Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most pathetic reasons you could ever imagine. I tell you, You have to be kidding me if you think the truth is always sitting right there on the surface, waiting for a gold star. We are looking at a Wednesday evening in May 2020 in Gilbert, Arizona. A man named Nick Cordova is gone, leaving behind a wife and 2 young children who had to witness the terror of his final moments through the cold, unfeeling lens of a mobile telephone screen. It is a tragedy that cuts deep, the kind that stains your soul. But the investigation, that is where the rot sets in. Nick was an entrepreneur, a man who built his life on hard work and grit, raising his siblings as a father figure while building an air conditioning business. He was a good man, the kind who gave and gave until there was nothing left to take. And then there is his business partner, Dave Sweetman. I have spent a lifetime looking at men like Sweetman. They are the ones who occupy the shadows, the ones who seem to have a talent for being exactly where disaster happens, yet always claiming the status of victim. You have to wonder, does a man truly get knocked unconscious, only to wake up and immediately decide to hand a bloodied firearm to police by its barrel? The scene was a mess, a chaotic scramble of half-truths and bizarre artifacts, including a tooth and a hollowed-out potato, as if the perpetrators were playing some twisted game of cat and mouse. The official narrative suggests a robbery gone wrong. 2 men in green shirts and masks who walked in cause a scene and vanish into thin air. But the details, they simply do not stack up. How does a man claim he was robbed of everything he had, only to have over $1,000 in cash sitting in his pocket when the police conduct a search? It is an insult to the intelligence of any seasoned investigator. And let us talk about the surveillance footage. It shows the suspects, sure, but it also shows something much more chilling. It shows Dave peeking through the blinds, waiting, watching. Why would a man who is supposedly leaving the office for the day be pacing and peering out at the parking lot unless he was expecting a visitor? Nick had a gut feeling. He told his wife, Alicia, that he felt he was being watched. He feared that his partner might hire a professional to eliminate him to collect on a massive life insurance policy. And what happens? The policy exists. It is not $1 million, but $8 million. And the documents? They are forged. It is a mountain of circumstantial evidence that would make any detective worth their salt pause and look twice, 3 times, perhaps even a dozen times. Yet, the Gilbert Police Department seems to move with the speed of a snail in a blizzard. They cycle through detectives, they redact hundreds of pages of files, and they leave a grieving widow to fight for the truth all on her own. Alicia Cordova is the real hero in this story. She has spent 6 years holding the torch, refusing to let her husband become just another cold case file gathering dust in a basement. She has endured the trauma of watching the footage of her husband being executed, a memory that no human should ever have to carry. She has been met with closed doors, bureaucratic stonewalling, and the frustrating silence of an institution that seems more interested in protecting its own reputation than in finding the man who pulled the trigger. When you look at the life of the perpetrator, if indeed the shadow that follows Dave Sweetman holds a key, you see a pattern. There is always a trail of broken lives, mysterious deaths, and financial chaos left in the wake of such individuals. A death years earlier, a wife, and now a partner. It is too much to be a coincidence. I have seen the same script played out in hundreds of interrogation rooms across this country. The lies are always the same. The deflection is always the same. The motive is always money. Nick Cordova was a man who tried to rise, who tried to build a future for his family. And he was cut down by the greed of a man who looked him in the eye every single day. The truth has a way of coming out, usually in the quiet moments when the guilty think they have finally gotten away with it. We will keep digging. We will keep pushing. Because justice is not a gift that is given. It is a debt that must be paid. And for Nick, that debt is long overdue. I am Lt.Joe Kenda. People are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. Sometimes it is over a few dollars. Sometimes it is over ego. And sometimes It is just because they are plain cold-blooded snakes who think they are smarter than everyone else in the room. I have seen a lot of things in my time, but this story, it makes my blood run cold. My, you have to be kidding me. We are looking at a Wednesday in May 2020. A man named Nick Cordova is at his office, minding his own business, and his children are on a video call with him. Just like that, in the middle of a mundane conversation, a life is extinguished. I tell you, evil does not announce itself with a trumpet. It walks through the door wearing a mask. Nick was an honest man. He worked hard. He built a business. But he made the fatal mistake of trusting the wrong person. He brought in a partner, Dave Sweetman. Now, from what I have seen of this world, a man with a history of fraud, assault, and trespassing does not suddenly turn into a saint just because he has a desk in an office. Nick sensed it. He told his wife, Alicia, that he felt like he was being watched. He told her he was worried that his partner might hire a hitman to collect on a life insurance policy, and then he ended up dead. You do not have to be a genius to see the shadow hanging over that office. When the police arrived, they found a scene that would make any veteran investigator pause. You have a business partner, Dave, who is supposedly hysterical, pacing around, yet he has a pile of money in his pocket, while claiming he was robbed of everything. That is not just strange. It is a neon sign pointing toward a lie. He handed over a gun, a weapon he claimed he never fired, through a door while his partner lay dead on. The other side, my, the smell of deception is stronger than the smell of gunpowder in that room. Then there is the surveillance footage. It shows two men entering, one carrying an empty box of Freon to hide a weapon. They knew exactly where they were going. They knew exactly when Nick would be there. They executed the man and walked out. But the most chilling part? The partner, Dave, is seen on camera peeking through blinds right before they arrive. He was waiting. He was watching. If that is not a setup, I do not know what is. You have to be kidding me. Alicia Cordova has been fighting for 6 years. 6 years of watching the machinery of justice grind to a halt. She watched the footage herself and saw what the police seemed to miss or chose to ignore. She saw the man she trusted with her husband's life walk into a trap, and yet no one is charged. No one is behind bars. It is an absolute tragedy. I have sat across from many killers. I have looked into their eyes while they tried to sell me a pack of lies. They all think they are the smartest guy in the room. They think that they provide enough distractions, enough red tape, and enough confusion, the truth will just evaporate. But the truth does not go away. It waits. It lingers in the empty office, in the thousands of pages of redacted files, and in the heart of a wife who refuses to let her husband be forgotten. A man like Dave Sweetman might walk free today. He might even start a new business, but he carries the weight of those events. You cannot run away from the truth. It always catches up to you. I have seen it 1,000 times. I tell you, this case is not closed. It is just waiting for the right person to look at those 200 pages of redacted files and ask the one question that matters. Follow the money and you will find the devil. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most heinous acts for the most trivial reasons imaginable, and yet they always believe they are the smartest person in the room. I have spent a lifetime looking into the eyes of killers, and one thing is certain. They all think they have crafted the perfect narrative, a story so tight that the truth will never leak through the cracks. They're always wrong. My. You have to be kidding me if you think you can walk away from a scene like the one at Gilbert Air and just blend back into the wallpaper. We are looking at a case involving Nicholas Cordova, a man who was building a life, a business, and a future for his family, only to have it all extinguished on a Wednesday in May 2020. It was 5:30 in the afternoon. His wife, Alicia, was doing the dishes when the world shattered through the screen of a mobile device. Her children, on a video call with their father, heard the sound that no one should ever have to hear, a bang, and then Silence. A man who had just been there, vibrant and alive, was suddenly gone, silenced by a coward who likely had a plan, but certainly lacked the conscience to deal with the consequences. I tell you, the scene itself was a chaotic mess. You have an office space, a place of business, suddenly turned into a theater of death. You have a partner, Dave Sweetman, who claims he was a victim, claiming two mysterious men in masks walked in, demanded money, and vanished. It is a classic tale, one I have heard 1,000 times in back rooms and interrogation cells. But the details, they always trip them up. The discarded gun, the blood, the stories that shift like sand in the wind. A man claiming he was hit in the head, unconscious, yet somehow coherent enough to hand over a firearm to the police through a door crack. It is a script written by an amateur. What strikes me most is the absolute coldness of it all. The victim, Nick, was a man who saw the best in people. He walked into this business partnership with his eyes wide open, perhaps too wide, ignoring the red flags that were waving right in front of his face. He trusted a man who, by all accounts, was obsessed with currency. A man who saw insurance policies as a way to profit from a friend's expiration. That is the kind of betrayal that keeps you up at night. It is not just a crime. It is a calculated nature of the greed. To look at a partner and see a dollar sign instead of a human being is a level of moral bankruptcy that I find repulsive. And then there is the investigation, or the lack thereof. You have detectives who seem to lose their way, departments that hide behind redacted pages and bureaucratic silence. It is a failure of the system, plain and simple. When you have a wife like Alicia, who has been fighting for 6 years, digging for the truth that should have been handed to her on day one, you know something has gone wrong in the halls of justice. She watched the footage. She saw what really happened. She saw the moments that the police report conveniently left in the shadows. The peeking through the blinds, the calculated arrival, the execution. It was not a robbery gone wrong. It was a hit. You asked about the inner lives of these people. Nick was a man defined by love for his family. A man who stepped up as a father figure before he even had his own children. He was an optimist in a world that rarely rewards it. And then you have the other side of that coin, the kind of person who occupies that space with him. A person who lives in the gray, who maneuvers through life by taking what is not theirs, whether it is money or a life. The psychological distance between these two men is an ocean, and yet they were bound by a contract that ultimately became a death warrant. This is not a closed file. It is a wound that refuses to heal. Somewhere out there, the truth is waiting. It is hiding in the redactions, in the gaps of surveillance tapes, and in the memories of those who have yet to speak. I have seen cases go cold for a decade only to be broken by a single loose thread. And I tell you, when that thread is pulled, the whole story will come unraveling. If you are involved in something like this, if you are keeping a secret that weighs on your soul, you might as well start talking now. Because eventually, the silence will be broken. It always is. It is only a matter of time. You see, the thing about human beings is that they are walking, talking contradictions. They claim they want the truth, but they spend their whole lives hiding from it. They think they can outrun their own shadows, outsmart the system, and keep their secrets locked away in a drawer. But eventually, the truth has a funny way of kicking the door down. I have spent years looking into the eyes of men who think they are the smartest person in the room, only to watch them crumble when the weight of their own lies finally catches up to them. You have to be kidding me. Take the case of Nicholas Cordova, a man building a life, doing the work, taking care of his own. Then you have his partner, David Sweetman, a man with a history that reads like a warning label you ignore at your own peril. Fraud, trespassing, a trail of broken trust. Nick thought he was stepping into a golden opportunity, but he was really walking into a lion's den with a man who seemed to view life as a ledger, where everything, including a human soul, had a price tag. I tell you, the scene is haunting. A FaceTime call in progress. A 5-year-old girl catching a glimpse of her father's final moments. The frantic sounds of struggle echoing through a screen. And there stands Sweetman, pacing, hysterical, handing over a gun like it was a hot potato. He tells a story about 2 men in masks, a robbery gone sideways, money stolen, a hit to the head. It is a story designed to sound plausible. But it is missing the one thing every investigator looks for, the ring of truth. Why was he peeking through the blinds before they arrived? Why the confusion about the money in his pocket? The surveillance footage shows a movement, the violence, the cold, calculated execution, but it leaves the motive hanging in the air like smoke. Poor Alicia Cordova. She had the eyes to see what the authorities refused to acknowledge. She knew the fear in her husband's voice when he talked about insurance, about that chilling thought that someone might value his absence more than his presence. She lost her husband, the father of her children, and for 6 years, she has been left to pick up the pieces while the people responsible walk free in the sunlight. It is a tragedy of monumental proportions. She is the hero of this story, fighting to the red tape, the silence, and the bureaucratic indifference, simply because she understands that justice is not something you are given. It is something you have, to fight for until the very end. Look at the psychological landscape here. You have Nick, driven by duty, by the need to provide, perhaps blinded by his own integrity, a man who assumed that because he was honorable, everyone else around him was playing by the same rules. And then you have the shadow, the partner who seemed obsessed with liquidity, with shifting assets, with creating a world where he could profit from a tragedy. You wonder what goes through a man's mind when he sits across from the wife of the man he was, supposed to be partners with, knowing what she knows, watching her crumble, and still holding on to a story that just does not fit the evidence. The human mind is a dark, winding corridor. Some people lose themselves in it, and they never find their way back to being human again. Nick deserved better. Everyone deserves the truth. And in my experience, the truth is a stubborn thing. It does not go away. It just waits for someone with enough courage to drag it into the light. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most heinous acts for reasons so absurd, so trivial, that it defies all logic and morality. You want to talk about monsters? I have spent over 20 years looking them in the eye, and I tell you, the worst of them are the ones who hide behind a mask of normalcy, the ones who shake your hand while they are planning your funeral. This is the story of Nicholas Cordova, a man whose life was stolen in a place where he should have been safe, a place where he was supposed to be building a future for the family he adored. It was a Wednesday in May 2020 when the world tilted off its axis for Alicia Cordova. She was in her kitchen, performing the mundane rituals of domestic life, when her young daughter ran in terrified, clutching an electronic device. Her children were on a video call with their father, Nick, when suddenly a sharp, violent sound erupted, and the connection went dead. My. Imagine being a mother, holding the fragile safety of your children, while knowing deep in your gut that your husband has just been silenced. That is a terror that does not leave you. It settles in your bones and stays there. Alicia, acting on that primal, desperate love, raced toward the office of Gilbert Air, that HVAC business Nick owned with his partner, David Sweetman. Her mind was a whirlwind of denial, a frantic search for any outcome other than the one her heart feared most. When she finally tore through that yellow tape, she was met with a silence more deafening than any scream. Her husband was dead, and then there is the partner, David Sweetman. The scene the responding officers found was, quite frankly, bizarre. David was there, peering through the blinds like a frightened animal, then handing over a bloodied firearm through a crack in the door, claiming it was his, claiming he was just a victim, claiming he knew nothing of the violence that unfolded behind those office walls. He had a story ready, a convenient tale of 2 men in masks, a robbery gone wrong, and a blow to the head that wiped his memory clean. You have to be kidding me. You see, the criminal mind is lazy. It creates a narrative, but it always forgets to account for the truth that bleeds through the cracks. They found over $1,000 in cash in David's pocket, despite his claims that he had been robbed of everything he had. They found surveillance footage that showed David peering out to wait for someone, and they found a history of financial greed and shady dealings that painted a picture far different from the one he presented to the police. This was not a robbery. This was an execution. I have seen enough crime scenes to know when a story is manufactured, and this one stinks of cold, calculated malice. David wanted out, David wanted money, and David saw in Nick an obstacle to be removed and a policy to be cashed out. He was obsessed with the life insurance money, an $8 million prize that he tried to claim by forging signatures and shifting blame. He was a man who saw his partner not as a friend, not as a father to two young children, but as a business asset that had matured and needed to be liquidated. And what are the victims? Nick was a man of integrity, a man who loved a challenge, who built a life on hard work, and that very quality, that desire to rise, made him a target for a leech like Sweetman. Alicia, meanwhile, has been forced to become an investigator in her own right, fighting through redacted reports, bureaucratic silence, and the agonizing void where justice should be. She has watched the footage. She has heard the final moments of her husband's life, and she continues to stand in the light, refusing to let the shadows consume the truth. The perpetrators of this act may still be walking free, living their lives, perhaps even running new businesses, but they are prisoners of their own secrets. They are living in the echo of that gunshot. They think they got away with it, but justice is a patient hunter. And as for the rest of us, we are left to look at the cold, hard facts and wonder, how much is a human life worth to a monster? To David Sweetman, the answer was $8 million. To the rest of the world, it is everything. I tell you, the truth always rises, no matter how many pages you black out, no matter how many years you hide in the dark. It is waiting there at the end of the line, for everyone. People are strange creatures. They kill for the most trivial reasons imaginable, leaving a trail of broken hearts and unanswered questions in their wake. I have spent a lifetime looking into the abyss, and I tell you, the darkness inside a man is far deeper than any grave. You have to be kidding me if you think justice always finds its way. Sometimes it just wanders off, lost in a sea of incompetence and bureaucratic red tape. Let us look at the case of Laura Sweetman, a woman of science, a pediatric neurologist, someone who spent her life mending others, yet she could not fix the fracture in her own home. She lived with a man, Dave Sweetman, who radiated the kind of toxicity that poisons everything it touches. Imagine the internal torment of a woman who realizes her husband has been living an entirely separate life, complete with another family, all while she played the role of the devoted wife. The betrayal is a blade that cuts deeper than any physical wound. By April of 2013, she had finally found the courage to cut the cord. She planned her escape with the precision of the doctor she was, arranging her departure while he was out of town. But abusers do not like to lose control. When faced with the end of his grip, Dave Sweetman turned into a man cornered by his own greed and ego. The audio recording of that night, where she fought to leave and he fought to keep her, is a testament to the suffocation of a relationship gone cold. He held her against her will, threatening to end his own life, a classic tactic to keep a victim tethered to his side. The authorities intervened, but justice was as elusive as a shadow. Insufficient evidence, they said. A protective order was the only shield she was granted. Imagine living in that state of constant vigilance, always looking over your shoulder, wondering if the man you once loved, or the shadows he hired, was lurking in the dark. It is a slow, agonizing death of the spirit. Then December of 2013. She is found in her home, the sanctuary she had desperately carved out for herself. Now a scene of mystery. The gate at the stairs, the unlocked back door, the foaming at the mouth. A scene that screamed of intervention. yet the authorities whispered of natural causes or accidents. How do you reconcile a woman in her prime, a doctor, with an autopsy report that reads like a collection of shrugs and missed opportunities? My, the incompetence of those tasked with finding the truth is staggering. Dr. Shelley, the man with the moral compass of a snake, and Norman Wade, the convicted thief running the toxicology lab. These are the gatekeepers of our justice system. It makes you wonder, does the truth even stand a chance when the scales are held by hands so tainted? I tell you, it is a farce. Laura was surrounded by men. Well, Shaheen, Darren, Emeka, Bruce, yet no one bothered to look past the surface. They did not map out their movements. They did not challenge their alibis. They saw a woman with a difficult past and decided it was easier to look away than to look for the truth. It is lazy, it is cruel, and it is a slap in the face to anyone who believes that a life matters. Laura deserved better than a cold file and a dismissed investigation. She deserved the truth. And every single person who chose to bury the facts under a mountain of administrative convenience is complicit in the silence that still hangs over her memory today. People often ask me if there is such a thing as closure. I tell them closure is a myth. There is only the truth and the burden of carrying it until the very end. The question remains, who took her life, and why did the system let them get away with it? 1,313 days later, and the silence is deafening. We must demand better, because if we do not, who will be next? Human beings are strange creatures. They commit the most heinous acts for the most trivial reasons imaginable, and yet they always believe they are the smartest person in the room. I have spent decades staring into the abyss of the human condition, and I tell you, it never gets any easier to stomach the sheer arrogance of a killer who thinks he has pulled off the perfect crime. My, you are looking at the case of Laura Sweetman, a woman whose life was a brilliant, promising tapestry woven with dedication and medical excellence, only to have it unraveled by a man whose shadow seems to stretch over every tragedy in his vicinity. You have to be kidding me if you think it is just a coincidence that a husband with a history of alleged abuse, a looming divorce, and a reputation that turned colleagues cold just happened to be near the center of her life when she ended up dead in a bathtub. I have seen enough crime scenes to know that when the air in a room feels thick with unsaid fears, someone is usually lying through their teeth. Laura was not just some random victim. She was a pediatric neurologist, a woman who understood the fragility of life and the cold reality of anatomy. Yet she found herself trapped in a domestic nightmare that felt more like a cage than a home. Her husband, David Sweetman, played a game of semantics that would make a seasoned interrogator laugh, if it were not so sickening. He claimed he was just holding her, just hugging her, while she screamed for help, "Give me a break." A woman does not call the authorities and file for an order of protection because she is enjoying a cozy embrace in a domestic dispute. The reality is that the people around them were terrified of him, and for good reason. They saw the mask slip, they felt the creepiness, and they kept their mouths shut because they knew, or at least suspected, that David Sweetman was a man you did not cross. Then we look at the investigation itself, and you have to wonder if the people tasked with finding the truth were even awake at the wheel. The police files are a masterclass in missed opportunities. They have an audio recording of a physical struggle. They have a report of a suspicious vehicle parked in her driveway weeks before she died. And yet, the case eventually just dissolves into the ether with the label of undetermined. Undetermined, that is a word that should never be attached to a death that reeks of foul play. It is a convenience for those who do not want to do the heavy lifting of a real investigation. And what about the medical examiners? You have a doctor who, in his own time, thought it was appropriate to show his children a human brain, and a laboratory director who was convicted of grand theft of evidence, both working on a high-profile death. It is absolutely disgraceful. They argue about toxicology screens and heart conditions while ignoring the obvious. The girl had injuries that did not just materialize out of thin air. They failed to connect the dots between her fear, the suspicious vehicle, the men she was seeing, and the husband who stood to gain everything by her absence. A heart attack with no physical evidence on the organ itself? My. The incompetence is staggering, and it leaves a family, friends, and the public with nothing but a void where justice should be. Laura was a mother, a doctor, and a vibrant soul who deserved better than to be a cold case in a file cabinet. It is a tragedy of monumental proportions when the system designed to protect the innocent instead protects the status quo, leaving killers to walk free, while the families of the victims are left to do the detective work themselves. I have said it before, and I will say it again. People are capable of anything, and they will go to extraordinary lengths to hide their sins. But the truth always leaves a footprint. It is just a matter of whether or not someone is willing to look down and follow it. I tell you, this case is a stain on everyone involved in the original inquiry. And until someone has the courage to pick it up and look at it with eyes that are not clouded by indifference or exhaustion, the ghost of Laura Sweetman will continue to demand an answer that should have been provided over a decade ago. People are strange creatures. They kill for reasons so trivial, so pathetic, that it would make a saint weep. You think you know the monster under your bed? You have no idea. You look at a life, a career, a future, and you see the light. I look at it, and I see the shadows where the truth hides. My. You have to be kidding me if you think this is just some unfortunate accident. Let us walk through the darkness surrounding Laura Sweetman, a woman of science, a pediatric neurologist, a mother. She had the world in her hands, yet she was living in a nightmare of her own making, trapped by a man who made her feel like nothing. Dave Sweetman, a man who, by all accounts, treated human lives like disposable assets in a ledger. They say he was manipulative. They say he was cold. And when a man is as cold as a grave, you start to wonder who he has left behind him. Laura found out he had an entire secret life, a whole other family. She tried to break free. She planned her escape like a prisoner plotting a jailbreak. But freedom in a world like this is a dangerous commodity. I tell you, the evidence is a mess of contradictions and omissions. April 2013, the night she tried to leave him. He held her hostage. He threatened her. He grabbed her by the throat. She recorded it. She fought for her life. And yet the courts, in their infinite wisdom, dropped the charges. Insufficient evidence. I have seen that phrase on more death certificates than I care to count. It is the coward way out for a system that is too lazy to dig. They gave her a protection order. Yes, but a piece of paper is a poor shield against a man who has already shown you he does not care about rules. Then comes December 2013, a Monday morning. She does not show up for work. A doctor, a professional missing? That is the first siren in the night. They find her in her bathtub, unresponsive, dead, no signs of struggle on the doors. But a child's safety gate at the bottom of the stairs is out of place. A back door, usually locked, is wide open. And Dave is sobbing before he even knows what happened. My. Why are you crying, Dave, if you do not know what the detective is going to say? It is a performance, and a poor one at that. And then we look at the men of science. Dr. Mark Shelley, the man who performs the autopsy, the man who labels her death as undetermined. He is the same man who once took a dead Marine's brain home and let his children feel it. You have to be kidding me. Is this a medical examiner or a character in a horror story? He says there is no evidence of drowning, but there is foaming at the mouth. There is frothy fluid in the lungs. There is bruising on her body that he cannot explain. He claims she had a heart attack 2 years prior, a claim his own autopsy refutes by showing a perfectly healthy heart. It does not add up. Nothing about this adds up. You see, the truth is often buried under a mountain of incompetence and fear. Laura was a woman terrified of her husband, a woman who felt she was being followed, a woman who was desperate enough to ask for prescription favors just to survive the anxiety of her own existence. And yet, the investigation? It was a ghost. They never checked the alibis of the other men in her life. They never followed up on the suspicious white car parked in her driveway. They closed the book because it was easier than reading the pages. I have spent my life looking into the eyes of killers, and I can tell you, they thrive on the indifference of others. They rely on the fact that we look away. We want to believe in accidents. We want to believe that someone just dies in a tub, and it is nobody's fault. But that is the lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. Laura Sweetman did not just cease to exist. She was part of a chain of events that leads back to a man who, years later, would see his business partner executed in the back of the head. It is a pattern, and patterns in this business do not lie. I tell you, when you find a truth that's buried, you do not let it stay in the ground. You dig until your hands bleed, because the dead have a way of speaking to those who are finally willing to listen. Human beings are strange creatures. They destroy the things they should cherish, and they build their lives upon foundations of sand and lies. I have spent my entire life staring into the abyss of human cruelty, and let me tell you, it never gets easier to stomach. People will kill for money, for ego, or simply because they are too cowardly to face the consequences of their own pathetic choices. My. You look at a case like this, the death of Laura Sweetman, and you have to wonder how anyone manages to sleep at night when the truth is buried under layers of incompetence and indifference. You have to be kidding me. It was December of 2013 when they found her, a brilliant pediatric neurologist, left in her own bathtub while the world kept turning outside. The police saw what they wanted to see, or perhaps more accurately, they chose not to see anything at all. You have a husband, Dave Sweetman, a man who seems to leave a trail of suspicion and misery wherever he walks. There was talk of abuse, of affairs, of a life held together by fear rather than love. Laura knew it. Her friends knew it. But the system decided that undetermined was a good enough answer to close the file and stop asking uncomfortable questions. It is a disgrace. Consider the landscape of this tragedy. You have a woman trapped in a marriage that was rotting from the inside out. She was planning her escape, mapping out a future away from belittling, the manipulation, and the threats. And then she is gone. The scene itself, the gate moved at the bottom of the stairs, the unlocked back door, the lack of definitive cause in the medical report, all screams of a puzzle that no one bothered to put together. I tell you, in my line of work, you learn very quickly that coincidences are rarely coincidental. When you have a husband who is accused of orchestrating the execution of his own business partner, years later, you have to ask yourself why his shadow was not scrutinized more closely the first time. Then there is the matter of the experts. You trust a medical examiner to be the voice of the dead, to provide the objective truth that the living tries so hard to hide. But here, we have men who treated evidence like a show and tell project for their children, or who had records of theft and dishonesty that would make a career criminal blush. How can justice be served when the gatekeepers are walking to the back door? It is a systemic failure that leaves the families of victims like Laura in a permanent state of limbo, waiting for answers that should have been provided decades ago. Laura was more than a victim. She was a mother, a doctor, a person with a bright, vibrant life that was snuffed out while those responsible sat back and waited for the heat to die down. The sheer arrogance of the perpetrators is matched only by the apathy of those tasked with the investigation. They failed her. They failed her children. They failed every patient who walked into her office, hoping for a miracle, only to have their doctor taken from them by someone who lacked the most basic shred of human decency. It makes your blood boil. I look at the pieces of this case, the suspicious car in the driveway, the deleted text messages, the convenient medical history, and I see a narrative that demands to be heard. We live in a world where the loudest voices often drown out the truth. But the truth does not disappear just because it is ignored. It waits. It lingers in the margins of police reports and in the memories of those who love the departed. It is time for people to stop being afraid of the shadows and start demanding accountability. Justice is not a gift. It is a right. And until someone has the courage to tear down the walls of silence surrounding the death of Laura Sweetman, that justice remains an open wound, festering in the dark. My. You see, the thing about human beings is that they are walking, talking contradictions. They live their lives behind a veil of normalcy, all while burying secrets deep enough to rot the foundation of their own existence. You walk into a room, you see a picture-perfect family, and you think you know the story. But underneath that veneer, you have no idea. You have to be kidding me if you think life is ever as simple as it looks. I have spent decades in the business of death, and I can tell you this. People do not just vanish from the earth without leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for those of us who know where to look. Laura Sweetman was a woman of science, a dedicated pediatric neurologist who spent her days saving lives, yet she could not save her own. She was trapped in a marriage that was less of a union and more of a slow-motion car crash. Tethered to a man named Dave, a man who possessed that cold, manipulative charisma that makes your skin crawl. You look at their history, the accusations, the domestic disturbances, the protective orders, and you realize Laura was fighting for her life long before she was found in that bathtub. And yet when she died, the system did not just fail her, it looked the other way. I tell you, the incompetence is staggering. You have a scene where a dog gate is knocked out of place, a back door left unlocked, and a woman who is deathly afraid of her husband dead in her own home, and the powers that be decide to label it undetermined? That is not an investigation. That is a dereliction of duty. They had a neighbor who saw a suspicious car, a white Isuzu rodeo, parked in her driveway, a man who was meticulously taking down license plate numbers. And what did the police do? Nothing. They sat on their hands while a woman's life was extinguished. Then you have the medical examiner, a man who thought it was acceptable to take human remains home for a show-and-tell session with his children. You have to be kidding me. That is not science. That is a desecration. It makes you wonder what else they were willing to overlook in the name of expediency or shortage of staff, when the people tasked with finding the truth are cutting corners or worse. The truth never stands a chance. The tragedy of Laura Sweetman is not just the act itself, whatever that act may have been. It is the silence. It is the fact that she was dating other men, that she was trying to carve out a new life, and that the authorities were too lazy or too indifferent to look past the low-hanging fruit. They did not interview the boyfriends properly. They did not scrub the phone data. And they did not hold anyone accountable. They let the case go cold because it was easier to mark a file as inactive than to do the grueling work of digging into the darkness. What I see here is a woman who was terrified, a woman who tried to break free from a man who belittled her, lied to her, and cheated on her, only to be found in a state that the experts could not even explain. It is maddening, it is pathetic, and it is the reason why people like me have to keep talking. Because when the system decides that your life is not worth the ink in their pens, you need someone to drag the truth out into the light. Laura Sweetman deserved better than to be a forgotten statistic in a broken system. She deserved justice. And justice is not something that just happens. You have to hunt for it. You have to demand it. And you have to be willing to look at the ugly parts of human nature that everyone else wants to pretend do not exist. Human beings are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine. I have spent my life staring into the abyss of the human heart, and I tell you, it is a dark, cold place where common sense goes to die. My, you have to be kidding me. But here we are again, talking about the summer of 1969. A young girl, Stephanie Casper, 19 years old, just about to step into the rest of her life. She walked out of a restaurant after a shift, a simple act millions of people do every day, and she never made it home. She was not just a victim. She was a daughter, a sister, and a person who deserved a lifetime of memories that were stolen by a coward in the shadows. The case found us on a Wednesday in July, when a 10-year-old boy out fishing on the Root River saw something that no child should ever see. He found a foot, just a foot, sticking out of the mud. When we processed that scene, we realized we were dealing with someone who had patience, who had skill, and who definitely had time. Her remains were scattered in brown paper bags and newspapers, discarded like trash along the riverbank. No torso, no organs, and a left leg missing. The pathologist found puncture wounds, precise cuts at the joints. This was not a crime of passion. This was the work of a sadist who knew exactly how to dismantle a human being. It was cold. It was clinical. It was terrifying. You start pulling on the threads of a person's life, and you find out that even the most innocent existence has secrets. Stephanie was hiding a relationship because of the color of her boyfriend John's skin. A sad commentary on the world she lived in. We looked at everyone. Her father, a man whose casual comment about never finding her if he were the killer, sent chills down my spine, though it turned out to be just a dark, misguided sense of humor. We looked at the managers, the cooks, the guys coming home from Vietnam. We had people lying to us, people trying to manipulate the investigation to fit their own twisted narratives. Some teenagers even tried to play hero or villain just to get attention from their girlfriends. I tell you, the level of vanity involved in some of these people is just staggering. The investigation moved from the river to a farmhouse where a second site was discovered. More bones, a cardboard box containing a towel. It was a trail of breadcrumbs left by a predator who felt comfortable navigating rural back roads. We had theories about gambling debts, theories about lovers' quarrels, and theories about a random predator roaming the highways. Years passed. The case went cold, but the pain did not. It rippled through the Casper family for decades. We had sisters coming forward in the 80s, pointing fingers at brothers who abused them, men who lied about trips to Hawaii to cover their tracks. We had partial DNA profiles that haunted us, whispers of guilt that we could not quite prove because the technology of the day just was not good enough. It is infuriating to look back at the missed opportunities, the bureaucratic walls, the lies that were accepted as truth. We had suspects like Michael Bartelt, who placed himself at the scene only to later change his story entirely. We had suspects like Wilbert Mackey, a monster who allegedly forced his own children to help dispose of bodies, a man whose existence was a blight on the earth. You have to wonder, how many others are out there? How many people walk among us with these shadows in their eyes? The case of Stephanie Casper is not just about a murder. It is about the long, agonizing wait for justice that still, even today, remains unfinished. It is about a sister-in-law like Romaine, who carries the weight of a woman she barely knew, and a family that has been hollowed out by a loss that never truly fades. You have to be kidding me if you think this is over. We keep digging. We keep listening. Because as long as there's a breath left in us, we owe it to the victims to bring the truth into the light. Human beings are curious creatures. They kill for reasons so trivial, so monumentally stupid, that you would find it hard to believe if I told you. You look at a life, a young girl with the whole world ahead of her, and you see it snuffed out in a flash of violence by someone who thought they could get away with it. You have to be kidding me. I have spent decades staring into the abyss of human cruelty, and let me tell you, there is no bottom to it. In the summer of 1969, a young woman named Stephanie Casper walked out of a restaurant after a shift, and she simply vanished into the night. It is the kind of case that keeps a detective awake at 3 a.m, when her remains were eventually scattered across Racine County. It became clear to any investigator with half a brain that this was not a crime of passion or a spur of the moment mistake. This took skill. This took patience. This took a cold, dark place inside a human heart that most of us cannot even comprehend. When you find a victim dismembered in such a methodical, surgical way, you are not dealing with an amateur. You are dealing with someone who is comfortable with death. Someone who looks at a human being not as a life, But as an object to be broken down and disposed of like household trash, it turns my stomach. Stephanie was 18 years old, full of kindness, looking for a future that she never got to see. Her parents, Charles and his family, were left with a void that can never be filled. I look at their pain, and I feel a weight in my chest that never quite goes away. You see, the worst part of my job is not the bodies. It is the living. It is the family members who have to carry the burden of what if for the rest of their lives. For years, this case pulled investigators in every direction, like a compass spinning in a storm. They looked at the boyfriend, John, a young man who was simply trying to love someone in a world that was too narrow-minded to accept. They looked at a co-worker, Michael Bartelt, whose own family eventually turned on him, pointing fingers and spinning tales of guilt and abuse that make you wonder what kind of secrets are buried in the walls of some homes. I tell you, families are like icebergs. You only see the tip, but there's a whole lot of misery hidden beneath the surface. Then you have the rumors. A father who supposedly joked about his own daughter's death? My. That is a stain that never washes off. But rumors are not evidence. You cannot put a rumor in a courtroom. You need facts. You need blood. You need hair. You need the cold, hard logic of forensics. And for decades, the technology just was not there. They were chasing shadows in the dark with a flickering candle. What strikes me about this case is the arrogance of the perpetrator, disposing of a body in multiple sites, moving across miles, shedding evidence like a snake sheds its skin. This killer was bold. They thought they were smarter than the men in the badges. They always do. But they forget one thing. Every single person leaves a footprint. Even if it takes 50 years, we keep looking. We keep pushing. Because Stephanie Casper deserves justice. Now, they're looking at new leads. Maybe it was a stranger. Maybe it was someone with a history of violence that stretched across state lines. A predator moving through the shadows of the nation. It is a haunting thought, is it not? That a killer could be anyone, anywhere, living a normal life while a family is shattered by what they did. We keep digging. We keep testing the DNA. We follow every thread, no matter how frayed, because we owe it to the victim. You look at these cases, and you have to ask yourself, what is it in a person that makes them think they have the right to erase another life? It is a sickness. And my job, my only purpose in those years, was to find the cure by putting them behind bars. This case is not closed. It is a wound that is still open. But mark my words, there is always someone who knows something. There is always a piece of the puzzle that has not been placed yet. And until that piece is found, we do not rest. Never. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit atrocities for the most trivial, pathetic reasons you could ever imagine. I tell you, you look into the eyes of a killer and you expect to see a monster, but half the time, you are just looking at a coward who lost his way in the dark. The case of Stephanie Casper is one that haunts the back roads of my mind. It is a puzzle of missing pieces, literally and figuratively, spanning decades of human failure and agonizing silence. Picture the scene in the summer of 1969. A young woman, barely 18, with her whole life laid out like an open book, steps out of a restaurant after a shift and vanishes into the ether. You have to be kidding me if you think such a bright light just goes out without someone holding the match. When those remains were found scattered in pieces along the Root River, it told us everything we needed to know about the predator we were hunting. This was not a crime of sudden passion. This was the work of someone with skill, patience, and a cold, calculating detachment. Someone who knew exactly how to dismantle a life and leave nothing behind but questions. The police work in those early days was a slow, agonizing crawl through the mud. You had a father, Charles, whose own family looked at him with suspicion, a rumor mill churning out stories of gambling debts and forbidden love affairs. And then you had the restaurant, a place where the lines between professional and personal were blurred until they were invisible. You had men like Michael Bartelt, who gave conflicting stories and acted with suspicious eagerness to be anywhere else but under the magnifying glass of an investigation. I tell you, when a suspect starts talking about Hawaii or Vegas while a girl is lying in a riverbed, my internal alarm bells start ringing like a fire station on a Sunday morning. The tragedy of Stephanie Casper is not just in how she died, but in the echoes of that death. It tore through her family like a shrapnel blast. Her brother, her parents, they lived with the ghost of that girl for 57 years. They watched suspects walk free, watched the trail go cold, and watched technology slowly catch up to a secret that was buried in the dirt. It is a testament to the stubbornness of justice that men like Lieutenant Van Sack are still out. They're digging, still trying to put the pieces together when the world has long since moved on. We look at the evidence now, the cigarette butts, the newspaper, the hair that held the genetic code of a stranger, and we realize that the killer was likely a ghost, passing through, a stranger who saw a girl walking home and decided, his own twisted arrogance, that he could own her fate. It makes me sick to my heart. The arrogance of these people, thinking they can erase a human being from existence and get away with it. You have to be kidding me if you think time allows you to outrun the truth. Even now, with new leads and new investigations, the shadow of that condemned bridge in Racine County remains. Stephanie deserved better. She deserved to celebrate her birthday. Instead, she became a lesson in the fragility of our safety and the darkness that hides in plain sight. It is a cold, hard truth, but we do not stop. We do not rest until final piece is placed. That is the only way to honor those who no longer have a voice to scream for themselves. My. You see, human beings are strange creatures. They walk through this life, often oblivious to the darkness that tracks them like a shadow, waiting for that one moment of vulnerability to strike. People kill for reasons that would turn your stomach. Greed, obsession, a fragile ego that cannot handle a simple rejection. But what happened to Stephanie Casper? That was something else entirely. That was not a crime of passion. That was a display of calculated, cold-blooded patience. And I tell you, when you find a girl in pieces, scattered like refuse along a riverbank, you are not looking for a human being anymore. You are looking for a predator who has had the time to perfect his craft. I look at this case in perspective of a man who has spent a lifetime staring into the abyss, and what strikes me is the sheer arrogance of the perpetrator. He treated a human life as if it were a puzzle he could dismantle at his leisure. He had skill. He had composure. You have to be kidding me if you think this was the work of some amateur who lost his temper in a parking lot. No, this was someone who moved through the night with a terrifying sense of purpose. Stephanie, poor girl, she was on the cusp of everything. 18 years old, bright-eyed, working a waitressing shift, looking for a way to carve out her own piece of the world. She had secrets, yes, a forbidden romance, a desire for independence that her parents perhaps did not fully grasp. But that does not make her a victim of circumstance. It makes her a victim of a monster who was lurking in the periphery of her routine. She was kind, she looked out for others, and she had that youthful optimism that is so easily extinguished by the cynical reality of a killer. Then you have the suspects, a parade of characters who muddy the water. You have the father, Charles, whose reaction to a detective's direct question is enough to make any seasoned investigator take a long, hard breath. A chuckle over the death of his own child? That is not normal. That is a chilling disregard for sanctity of life. Or perhaps a psychological defense mechanism so warped that it defies logic. Then you have the cooks, the managers, the men from the restaurant who seem to lie as easily as they breathe. They offer up alibis that crumble under the slightest pressure. They talk of trips to Hawaii that never happened and shifts that never occurred. They are small, petty men who played at being big, but they leave behind a trail of deception that screams of something deeper. The police work here. It is a slow, agonizing crawl through the muck. The years pass, the technology slowly catches up, And every lead, every whisper of a brother's suspicion or a child's traumatic memory is just another fragment of a broken mirror. You look at the evidence, the cigarette butts, the newspaper, the discarded personal effects. It tells the story of a man who was shedding his own trail as he moved through the rural backroads of Wisconsin. He knew the land. He knew the bridges. He knew how to hide his tracks, at least for a while. But there's a tragedy here that goes beyond the grave. It is the ripple effect. The brothers who grew up in the shadow of this cold, unsolved mystery. The families torn apart by suspicion and the constant, gnawing question of who among them might be a monster in disguise. When you have a killer who leaves remains in sun-kissed boxes and ditches, you are not just killing a girl. You are poisoning the well for every generation that follows. I sit here and I analyze the psychology of this person, and I see a man who likely lived among us, hidden in plain sight. He was patient, he was meticulous, and he was undoubtedly watching. He was watching the investigators chase their tails, watching the families tear themselves apart, and feeling the perverted thrill of a man who believes he has beaten the system. But time, it is the one thing no criminal can ultimately outrun. Even if he dies in his bed, the truth has a way of rising to the surface. Like those remains on the riverbank, it is a haunting, persistent reminder that justice, no matter how long it takes, is a debt that the universe eventually demands to be paid. You see, the world is a dark place, and sometimes it is the people who walk among us in the daylight who carry the heaviest, ugliest shadows. You have to be kidding me if you think evil is always lurking in an alleyway. Sometimes it is sitting at the next table over, eating a burger, waiting for a girl to walk out the door. I tell you, I have seen things that would turn your hair white, but the case of Stephanie Casper, it sticks to your ribs. It is the summer of 1969. A girl in her prime, 18 years old, full of life, waitressing at a restaurant called Mark's Big Boy in Milwaukee. She walks out of that back door into humid night air, and just like that, she vanishes, gone, swallowed by the darkness. People are not just things you find in piles by a river. They are human beings with dreams and mothers who cry themselves to sleep for 50 years. When a young boy playing by that condemned bridge on 8 Mile Road in Racine County finds a human foot, the world stops turning for everyone involved. You look at a scene like that, and you realize you are not dealing with some amateur. You are dealing with someone who has patience, someone who has skill. The remains were scattered, wrapped in newspaper, with cigarette butts and burned matches left behind like twisted calling cards. No torso, no organs, no mercy. It is methodical. It is clinical. It is a signature of someone who knows exactly how to take a life and how to hide it. The victim, Stephanie. She was kind, a girl who looked out for the younger ones. Someone who was trying to find her place in a world that did not always understand her love for a man named John. She had secrets, the kind that tear families apart from the inside. But while everyone is pointing fingers at boyfriends and fathers, you have to look at the cold, hard logic of the timeline. The father, Charles, he gives an answer that would make any investigator's blood run cold, telling police that if he had done it, they would never have found her. A morbid joke, perhaps, or something much deeper. We will never know, because the rumors led nowhere, and the truth remains buried under decades of dust and silence. Then you have the characters in this tragedy. Michael Bartelt, a cook, a man who tells stories about trips to Hawaii that never happened. He lied. He manipulated. He put himself in the narrative when he did not belong there. And the family, the siblings who whisper in the dark, claiming he was a monster long before he was a suspect. You see, human beings are capable of the most heinous, disgusting acts of betrayal, not just against strangers, but against their own flesh and blood. Abuse, manipulation, the kind of psychological rot that defines a killer. It is enough to make you lose faith in the human race. But I have seen enough to know that for every monster, there is a detective, a man like Lieutenant Van Sack, who will spend his life trying to bring them into the light. You look at the forensics, the pubic hair found on a towel in a cardboard box, the DNA that refuses to tell a simple story. It is a slow, agonizing process. Wilbert Mackey, a man who made his own children fear the sound of his voice, a man who fed his dogs the sickest things you can imagine. Could he have been the one? Maybe, but the science said no. And that is the frustration of this job. You chase the ghosts, you follow the leads, you break your back for truth, and sometimes the evidence just does not align. But you do not stop. You never stop. You owe it to the girl who was waiting for a ride that never came, who was looking for a future that was stolen from her by someone with a knife and a total lack of empathy. I tell you, there is no end to the ripples of a murder. They do not just kill the victim. They kill a piece of every person who loved them. The brother, the parents. They carry that grief like a stone in their pockets for the rest of their lives. And now, all these years later, there is a new name, a whisper of a stranger, a possible serial predator connected to cases across the country. A man who might have been the one who convinced Stephanie to get into a car that night. It is a long, uphill battle against bureaucracy and time, but Lieutenant Van Sack is still fighting. And that is what we do. We fight until the truth comes out, no matter how cold the trail gets. Because in the end, that is all we have, the truth. And you better believe it is worth every single breath. Human beings are curious creatures. They walk through this life, convinced that they are the masters of their own fates, only to find that the world is a much darker, much more dangerous place than they ever dared to imagine. You want to hear about Stephanie Casper. My. You have to be kidding me if you think this is a simple story of a girl who just didn't come home. This is a story of a life stolen, of a family shattered, and of a shadow that crawled across the Wisconsin countryside for over 50 years. I have spent my life staring into the abyss of human cruelty, and let me tell you, the abyss rarely gives up its secrets without a fight. It was the summer of 1969, a time when the world felt like it was changing, but for Stephanie Casper, it was supposed to be the beginning of everything. She was 17, on the cusp of 18, vibrant and full of the kind of hope that only the young possess. She was a waitress at a place called Mark Big Boy. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was a girl who cared enough to look out for the little ones in her neighborhood. She was human, and she deserved a future. But someone decided she would not have one. When that boy found those remains on that July afternoon by the Root River, the world as the Casper family knew it ceased to exist. You look at a scene like that, and you see the work of someone who didn't just kill. They exerted power. They had skill. They had patience. They had time. Dismemberment is not an act of passion. It is not an act of a person who lost their temper in a moment of madness. It is an act of a person who wants to erase the victim, to turn a human being into a puzzle that the police might never solve. And that is exactly what they tried to do. Think about the sheer audacity of it, the precision of those cuts, the way those remains were scattered like garbage in brown paper bags and newspaper. My. It turns my stomach to think of the level of coldness required to walk away from a scene like that and go back to normal life. The killer walked among them. They stood in lines at the grocery store. They drove on the same highways. They breathed the same air as the grieving parents who were wondering why their daughter never walked through the door. The investigation was a mess from the start. You had a girl who disappeared into the night, and you had a trail that led nowhere but into the woods. The suspects came and went like ghosts. You had the boyfriend, John, who lived under the heavy, judgmental shadow of a time and place that couldn't handle who he was. You had the co-workers, people who hid behind bad memories and shifting timelines. You had the rumors about the father, Charles, which, I tell you, is a special kind of hell for any man to endure. You have to be kidding me if you think a father killed his own daughter. But when the police are desperate, they look at everyone, and the rumors about the Bartelt brothers, the stories of abuse, the hidden secrets, the lies told protect the guilty. It is the oldest story in the book. A mother lying to protect a son, a brother turning on a brother, a secret kept in a safe deposit box that never even existed. It is pathetic. It is the hallmark of small minds and dark hearts. And the worst part is the victim, Stephanie. She was keeping a secret of her own, trying to love someone in a world that wasn't ready to let her. She was a girl trying to find her independence, looking for an apartment, looking for a life that was her own. And that desire, that tiny spark of freedom, might have been what put her in the path of a monster. Lieutenant Van Stock has been fighting this fight for years. He has been digging through the rot of decades-old files, trying to find the one truth that will bring her home. And he is doing it for the right reasons. Not for the glory, not for the headlines, but for a family that has been haunted for over half a century. The DNA technology has changed. The world has moved on, but the horror of what happened to Stephanie remains as fresh as the day those bones were found. We are dealing with someone who knew those back roads, someone who moved with purpose, someone who was comfortable with the dark. And until we find them, we remain in the shadow of their crime. I tell you, it is enough to make a man lose his faith in humanity. But then I remember the investigators, the people who keep pushing, who keep listening, who keep searching. They are the only thing standing between the truth and the silence. And we owe it to the ghosts to keep looking. Because as long as the case is open, there is still hope for justice. And that, my friend, is the only thing that matters in the end. You see, the thing about human beings is that they are the only creatures on this planet who will lie to themselves even when they are staring directly into the abyss of their own unraveling. You sit across from me. You tell me your story. You offer up your alibis like they are holy relics. But the eyes always tell a different story. And I have spent a lifetime reading eyes. Melissa Casillas, a woman living a life that was, by all accounts, a house of cards held together by nothing more than hope and, perhaps, a touch of desperation. She vanishes into the thin New Mexico air on a Thursday in June, in the year 2025, leaving behind a trail that is as muddy as the boots her husband, Mark, claims he hadn't worn in ages. And yet, there's that fresh, dark stain, a silent witness to a truth that no one seems willing to confront. You have to be kidding me. A woman with a life, a daughter she loves, a future she is helping to build, simply walks away, wiping her digital existence clean with the precision of a seasoned operative. I tell you, in my line of work, we call that a performance, and the stagecraft here is nothing short of infuriating. You have a husband who treats his own wife's disappearance like a riddle he is trying to solve in real time, offering up theories like he is shopping for a new car, Florida, Arizona, maybe a contractor, maybe a lover, while the family on the other side watches him with a cold, hard suspicion that only grief can sharpen. They see a controller, a man who pushes wife to the brink of financial ruin, a man who treats the truth like a loose thread on a cheap suit. I look at this and I see the wreckage of a marriage, yes, but I also see the wreckage of an investigation that took a wrong turn before it even began. When the police hear a story from the person standing right in front of them, the husband, and choose to believe it over the evidence of their own eyes, or the lack thereof, they have already lost a battle. They let a potential trail grow cold because someone told them it was not worth the effort. How many times have I seen that? You listen to the story, you hear the conflicting accounts of those boots, the blood, the mysterious woman from Colorado who denies she ever existed, and you realize that everyone is playing a part in a play where the lead actress has gone missing, and the script is being written on the fly. Melissa is the victim here, no matter what labels they try to stick on her. She is a woman who, regardless of her choices, deserved to be found, to be understood, not to be turned into a talking point for a theory about government secrets or clandestine. disappearances. The human heart is a dark forest, and most people are terrified of what they might find if they ever bother to step off the path. They prefer the mystery, the conspiracy, the what if to the cold, hard reality that sometimes the monster is sitting right there at the kitchen table, or perhaps the victim simply had nowhere left to run. It is a tragedy, a messy, tangled human tragedy, and I tell you, it haunts me, not because of the phones or the cloud or the digital erasure, but because of the silence that follows. The silence is the only thing that never lies. My, you look at these files, and you have to wonder if humanity has lost its way, or if we were ever on the right path to begin with. You think you know people. You live with them. You break bread with them. You watch them wake up in the morning and brush their teeth. Then, in the blink of an eye, the mask slips, and you find yourself staring into an abyss you never knew existed right in your own living room. I tell you, I have seen some strange things in my time as a homicide detective, but this one, it is a riddle wrapped in a mystery, and frankly, it smells like a cover-up. Let us be honest about Melissa Casillas, a woman, a mother, a professional at a place where they handle matters that would make the average citizen lose sleep. At night, she goes missing. Poof, like smoke in a stiff wind. And you have the husband, Mark, a hunter, a man who claims to know the land. Yet he seems more interested in spinning tales and finding his own flesh and blood. You have to be kidding me. He tells the world she just walked away, that the debt, the stress, the pressure of a life built on lies finally broke her. He paints a picture of a woman running for the hills, abandoning the child she lived for, all while keeping his own story shifting like quicksand. Then you look at the evidence, or rather, the lack thereof. A home locked tight. Phones wiped clean to the factory settings, not once but twice at different times. Who does that? You do not wipe a phone if you are just going for a walk. You wipe a phone because you are terrified of what someone might find in the digital debris of your life and the blood. A little drop here, a little drop there, right by the fish tank. He says it is from the dog, from game, from some mundane accident. But you have to ask yourself, why would a man who claims he was at work all day be so nervous about a drop of red on his own floor? It is enough to make a seasoned investigator's skin crawl. The human heart is a dark, cluttered basement, and Melissa seems to have been hiding a lot in hers. She was living a double life, whispering different stories to different people, playing a game of cat and mouse, where she was both the predator and the prey. Did she have help? Was there someone else in that blue truck lurking near the highway? Or was she, as Mark suggests, simply trying to erase her existence because the weight of her reality had become too heavy to carry? I look at the daughter, Sierra, and my heart breaks. A girl who has already seen enough tragedy to last 3 lifetimes. Now caught in the middle of a tug-of-war between a father who talks too much and a family that is tearing itself apart searching for the truth. It is a classic tale of suspicion, where everyone is a suspect because nobody is being completely honest. You have people claiming they saw things, only to later deny it, or change the details until the truth becomes a distorted shadow of what actually transpired. You have to respect the mystery, but you cannot respect the lies. If Melissa walked away, she did so with a level of precision that is, frankly, chilling. But if she did not, if she was silenced, then someone in that house is the best actor I have ever encountered. My experience tells me that when a story has too many versions, it is because someone is desperate to keep the real one hidden. The truth, as I have always said, is a stubborn thing. It does not go away just because you want it to. It sits there, waiting in the silence, waiting for the one piece of evidence that will finally bring the whole house of cards crashing down. And as for those missing scientists, those names circulating in the dark corners of the internet, it adds a layer of paranoia to this mess that I frankly do not like. Is this about money? Is this about national security? Or is it simply about a woman who tried to buy her freedom and found out the cost was higher than she ever imagined, We may never know, but I can tell you this. In my line of work, you learn that people do not just vanish into thin air. They are taken or they choose to leave, but there's always a trail. And if you look hard enough, if you are cold enough, if you are persistent enough, you will find the end of that string. I just hope, for the sake of that poor girl, that the end of the string does not lead to a grave. My, you sit there and you ask me to look at this, to weigh the pieces of this puzzle, as if human lives are merely scraps of paper to be shuffled on a desk. I have spent a lifetime looking into the eyes of people who thought they were clever, people who thought they could outsmart the inevitable gravity of the truth. I tell you, it never ends the way they think it will. We are talking about Melissa Casillas, a woman who, by every account of those who love her, was a devoted mother, a woman tethered to the life she built, until the day she simply ceased to exist in the physical space of her own home. You have her husband, Mark, painting a picture of a woman crumbling under the weight of financial ruin, a woman who decided to turn her back on everything she knew. And then you have the other side, the Mondragons, who look at that same house and see not a departure, but a crime scene. You have to be kidding me if you think a person just walks away from their own life and leaves their keys, their purse, and their very identity behind, all while factory resetting their phones with the cold precision of a professional. That is not an accident. That is intent. That is a woman who, for a moment, held the pen to her own story and decided to write a final chapter that nobody else was allowed to read. But the internal landscape of such an act, the absolute isolation required to look at your own daughter, to look at the life you spent years constructing, and to decide that none of it matters anymore, that is a darkness I have seen too many times. Then there is the husband, Mark. He walks through that house with the eyes of a hunter. He tells us, reading the land, looking for signs of a struggle. He is quick with theories, isn't he? He offers up potential paramours, vague destinations, and insurance schemes like he is tossing breadcrumbs to keep the investigators from looking too closely at the man standing right in front of them. He speaks with an agitation that tells me he is not afraid of the truth. He is afraid of the narrative slipping out of his control. He claims he did not want the police distracted, yet he directs them away from leads with the confidence of a man who knows exactly what he wants them to ignore. And then there's the video, that grainy, flickering footage on Highway 518. There she is, walking with a backpack, hair pulled back, appearing as if she is on a mission. It is the kind of evidence that makes a detective want to scream, because it contradicts the very essence of what a loved one would believe. If she walked away, why? Was it the crushing debt? Was it the fear of losing her daughter to the future? Or was she, in that moment, merely a woman running from a version of herself that she could no longer tolerate? I look at the discrepancy in their accounts, the blood, the mud on the boots that somehow miraculously gathered a spiderweb in the absence of time, the conflicting stories about the morning argument, and I see a classic case of people choosing the reality that allows them to sleep at night. One side chooses a tragedy of a voluntary departure. The other chooses a horror of an abduction. And in the middle, you have a truth that is being buried under layers of ego, fear, and secrets. The human mind is a fragile, deceptive mechanism. We tell ourselves lies until they become the bedrock of our existence. Melissa left behind a digital ghost, a wiped existence that leaves the rest of us grasping at smoke. Whatever she was running toward, or whoever she was running from, she understood one fundamental truth about our world. When you want to disappear, you do not just leave your home, you erase your footprint. The arrogance of the living is a persistent thing, but the dead, or those who choose to live as if they are, they have a way of leaving the biggest voids. Of all, you ask me what I think? I think we are missing the one thing that never lies, the quiet, desperate intent of a woman who felt she had no other choice but to become a phantom. You see, the thing about human beings is that we are fragile, contradictory creatures. We like to think we are masters of our own destiny, walking through life with a clear path ahead. But then, in the blink of an eye, the story changes. The facts shift like sand in a desert storm. I have spent a lifetime looking into the eyes of men and women who thought they could bury the truth, and I tell you, there is no such thing as a perfect secret. Take this case of Melissa Casillas. A woman vanishes from her home, and within hours, you have two families standing on opposite sides of a canyon, screaming at each other, neither one willing to believe their own ears. It makes me sick. You have a husband, Mark, who acts like he is reading from a different script every single day. The financial ruin, the arguments, the mysterious tire tracks, the way he seemingly guides the investigation away from where his wife actually was. And then you have the Mondragons, the parents, who see a monster in every shadow and a lie in every breath the man takes. I have seen this before. I have sat in that interrogation room until my coffee went cold and the air grew stale, watching the tension climb until it snaps. My, it is tragic. Look at that daughter, Sierra. She is caught in the middle of this mess, trying to hold on to a version of her mother that maybe, just maybe, no longer exists. And then there is the technology. Factory reset phones, wiped cloud data, digital footprints erased with the cold, calculated precision of someone who does not want to be found. You have to be kidding me. You think you can just press a button and wipe away a life? You can clear a memory, sure, but you cannot clear the conscience of the people you leave behind. And that is what this is really about. It is about the void, the absolute, soul-crushing silence left in the wake of a person who simply stops existing in the world of the living, whether she walked away because the walls were closing in, or because she was looking for a way to break free from the chains of a failing marriage in a mountain of debt, or because something far more sinister reached out and touched her. That is the question that haunts me. Some people will point to these coincidences, these missing scientists, these whispers of deep state involvement and hidden knowledge, and they will want to believe in a grand conspiracy. It makes the horror easier to digest, does it not? But look at the evidence. Look at the mundane, pathetic, human reality of it. The arguments over a vape pen, the bank accounts bleeding money, the performance reviews, the desperate, empty gestures of kindness, a sandwich given, a gift sent by a stranger who turns out to be a phantom. That is a true face of evil, or at least the true face of human failure. I tell you, there is no closure here, only questions that fester. Why would a woman so deeply attached to her daughter, so filled with the promise of a new beginning, decide that the only way to get there was to leave behind everything that made her who she was? And the husband, always a husband, with his shifting alibis and his defensive posture. It does not look right. It never looks right. When you find yourself explaining away the blood, the mud, and the lies, you are already standing on the wrong side of the truth. One thing I have learned after all these years is that the truth does not care about your theories. The truth is sitting right there in the mud, in the digital ether, in the silence of an abandoned home. Somewhere, someone knows where Melissa Casillas is. They know why the phones were wiped. They know what happened on that highway. And I promise you, eventually, the truth has a way of rising to surface. No matter how hard you try to hold it down, it always does. You can run, you can hide, you can wipe your history clean, but you cannot outrun the ghost of what you left behind. My, what a terrible tangle web we weave. My. You see, the thing about human beings is that they're walking, talking bundles of secrets. And when a secret becomes too heavy, some people do not look for a way to share the load. They look for a way to drop it entirely. I have spent a lifetime looking at the aftermath of such decisions. I have walked into rooms where the air was still thick with the residue of a life abruptly paused. And let me tell you, it never gets any easier to stare into the void left behind by someone who simply ceased to be. Take the case of Melissa Casillas, a woman, a mother, An assistant at a place where the work is as heavy as the security clearances required to do it. You look at the facts, or what people claim are facts, and you have to be kidding me. A husband who thinks she just up and left, a family who is convinced she was taken, and a house that tells its own disjointed story. I have stood in enough homes to know that walls have ears and floors of memories. When investigators find a pair of hunting boots with fresh mud, you do not need a degree in forensic science to know something is out of sync. But then again, people will rationalize anything. A spider web here, a spilled fish tank there. It is the classic dance of the guilty or the truly profoundly confused. I look at the internal landscape of a woman like Melissa, and I see a pressure cooker. You are balancing debts. You are watching the security of your professional life crumble. And you are trying to be a mother to a daughter who has already seen more tragedy than any child. That creates a specific kind of internal fracture. Did she choose to break? Did she think that by wiping those phones, by scrubbing her digital footprint, she was hitting a reset button on her existence? It is a cold, calculated act, even if it feels desperate. To factory reset a device is to tell the world that you no longer wish to be found, that you want the mirror to go blank. But then look at the victim. We always talk about the perpetrator, but the victim is the one who carries the true weight of a mystery. Melissa was a person who held on to things, sentimental, stubborn, a collector of memories. To go from that to a digital ghost, that does not happen by accident. It is an act of sheer will. And yet, if she walked away, why the trail of breadcrumbs? Why the appearance on a security camera at 2:18 in the afternoon, walking with that backpack, with that purpose in her stride? It is the contradiction that kills me. You have a husband who seems more interested in building, theories in finding a wife, a police investigation that seems to move with the speed of a glacier, and witnesses whose stories shift like sand in a desert storm. A decapitated body, a man on horseback crying. You have to be kidding me. You have to wonder if these are just the fever dreams of a community, looking for answers where there are only questions. I tell you, there is a darkness that gathers in the corners of cases like this. It is the darkness of the unknown. When a person decides to become a ghost, they do not just take their own life away. They steal the peace of everyone they leave behind. They leave their loved ones in a perpetual state of purgatory, searching for a sign that will never come, or worse, a truth they are not prepared to hear. I have spent my years dealing with the absolute worst of human nature, and if there is one thing I have learned, it is that the truth is rarely as clean as we want it to be. It is messy, it is inconvenient, and quite often, it is hidden behind the very things people say when they think no one is listening. Whether Melissa Casillas walked into a new life or into a permanent silence, the tragedy remains the same. It is the silence that gets you, the silence, and the knowledge that every single person involved in this narrative, from the husband to the daughter to the investigators, is holding on to a piece of the puzzle that might just be a mirage. And that, my friend, is how the ghosts of these cases continue to haunt us long after the tape has been pulled up. My. You see, the thing about human beings is that they are walking, talking contradictions. They wake up in the morning, tie their shoes, and head off into the world, all the while carrying secrets that could tear their own lives apart. You think you know someone. You think you know the person sleeping in the bed beside you, the person you break bread with, the person you share a home with. But then the floor drops out, and you realize you've been living with a stranger. It is a tragedy, really. People do not just vanish into thin air. Physics does not allow for it. Someone, somewhere, knows exactly where Melissa Casillas is. I tell you, the details in this case make my head spin. A woman, an administrative assistant at a high-level laboratory, vanishes on a Thursday afternoon in June. She leaves behind her keys, her phone, her badge, the very tools of a person who intends to return. Or so it seems. Then you hear about the factory reset phones and the wiped digital footprint. And you have to wonder, Was this a woman fleeing a pressure cooker of debt and personal despair? Or is someone standing there, looking you in the eye and lying through their teeth? You have to be kidding me if you think that many things happen by accident. Let's look at Mark Casillas, a man who spends his time tracking game in the backcountry. He knows how to read the land, how to spot signs of life and struggle. Yet, when his own wife goes missing, he is all over the map. One moment, he is convinced she walked away on her own because of the financial mess they were in. The next, he is defensive, agitated, and pointing fingers at everyone but himself. He brings up the muddy boots by the fish tank, a classic, if clumsy, attempt to explain away forensic evidence. He claims there is no blood, yet the tests say otherwise. Why the deflection? Why the constant narrative building? If you have nothing to hide, you do not need to build a house of cards. You just tell the truth, simple and plain. And then there is the daughter, Sierra. My heart breaks for her. Caught between two sides of a family that cannot agree on the color of the sky. Let alone what happened to her mother. She saw her mother that day. A quick lunch, a sandwich, a moment of normalcy that now feels like a ghost story. And the camera footage, that grainy, silent witness showing Melissa walking along the highway, alive and purposeful. It complicates everything. Does it prove she left on her own? Or does it merely show the last time she was seen walking toward a fate no one can quite put their finger on? You look at the players in this drama. The distraught parents, the Mondragons, who smell a cover-up from a mile away. The mysterious friend from Colorado who pops up with a $50 gift and vanishes just as quickly. The local characters, like Rick Valerio, spinning tall tales of decapitated bodies and strange sights. It is a circus of misinformation. The police seem to have been chasing their tails, taking word for fact and letting critical leads go cold because someone told them it was not worth. The look, that is not how you find a missing woman. You do not ask permission to follow a lead. You chase it until it either gives you the truth or hits a dead end. There is a darkness here, a cold, calculated silence. If Melissa decided to shed her old life like a snake sheds its skin, she did a masterful job of it. But if she was taken, if she was made to disappear, then the person responsible has left enough breadcrumbs to fill a forest. The wiping of the devices, the lack of bank activity, the total absence of a trace. These are not the actions of a woman out for a stroll. These are the actions of someone terrified or someone with a plan. Conspiracy theories? Sure, they pop up like weeds. Talk of secret labs, stolen energy, vanished scientists. It makes for a hell of a headline. But I have spent my life in the dirt of real cases, and I know that the most terrifying monster is usually the one sitting at your own dinner table. It is almost always someone known, someone trusted, someone whose story just never quite matches the evidence. I have seen it 1,000 times. People lie, they shift, they change their stories as the pressure mounts, hoping that if they talk long enough, the truth will somehow get buried under the noise. But the truth has a funny way of staying exactly where it is. It does not move. It waits for someone with enough grit to dig it up. So, here we are, a missing woman, two families at each other's throats, and a digital trail that leads straight to a wall. You have to ask yourself, what is the one piece we are missing? Because I promise you it is there. It is hidden in the silence, in the pauses, in the things that were never said. And until that piece is found, Melissa Casillas remains a ghost, haunting the lives of everyone she left behind. It is a sad, messy, complicated world, and I tell you, it never ceases to amaze me what human beings are capable of doing to one another. Human beings are strange creatures. They destroy lives for the most trivial, pathetic reasons imaginable, leaving behind a wake of shattered souls and unanswered questions. I have spent decades staring into the abyss of the criminal mind, and I tell you, it never gets easier to stomach the sheer arrogance of those who think they can simply erase a human. Life as if it were a smudge on a window. You look at a town like Winsboro, Texas, a place where everyone is supposed to know everyone. And you realize that proximity does not mean intimacy. Sometimes the secrets are buried in the very places where you least expect them to fester. We are talking about Brittany McGlone, a 19-year-old girl who was doing exactly what she was supposed to be doing. She worked, she saved, she had dreams of nursing school. She was a kid with a future. And then, on a day that broke her routine, she walked into the house of her boyfriend, Jeff Stogner, and she never walked out. You have to be kidding me if you think this was some random act. No, this was intimate. This was personal. Someone knew she was there. Someone knew the layout of that house. And someone felt entitled enough to commit a cold-blooded slaughter and then have the audacity to clean themselves up in the bathroom afterward. It makes my skin crawl. The killer stood there, washing away the blood of the girl who had her whole life ahead of her, and then walked out into the Texas sun as if nothing had happened. The investigation started off with the usual suspects, and let me tell you, it was a mess of contradictions. The boyfriend, Jeff, he seemed distraught, but in this business, grief can be a mask. He had an alibi, a trip to pick up his grandmother, and the authorities verified the timeline. But the shadows, in this case, stretch long. Then you have the grandfather, a man whose dark history with the victim started to surface, like a rot under floorboards. It is a sickening thought, isn't it? The people who should be your protectors are sometimes the ones who cause the most profound damage to your spirit long before they ever touch you physically. But the evidence, the cold, hard logic of time cards and locations, pushed them aside. Then came Chad Carr. Now, here is a man who practically auditioned for the role of a predator. You look at his past, that incident in 2001 with the jack handle, and you see a pattern that is as clear as day. He had the temperament, he had the history of violence against women, and he had the proximity to the McGlone case. When you hear about the blood on the shorts, the white t-shirt, the items found at his aunt's place, you realize that justice is often delayed not by a lack of truth, but by a lack of will. A failed polygraph, a shifting story, a man who acts suspicious because he cannot help but act like a guilty man. It is all there. It is a tragedy beyond words that it took 15 years for an arrest to be made, and even then, the system stumbled. A no bill by grand jury? I have seen some frustrating things in my time, but when the legal process fails to present the full picture to the people tasked with deciding if a case should move forward, it is a slap in the face to the victim. Brittany McGlone deserved better than a cold case. She deserved a trial. She deserved to have the person who ended her life held to account in a court of law. When I reflect on the nature of these crimes, I think about the silence of the victims. Brittany is gone, her birthdays are gone, her potential is gone, and the silence in her family's home is a testament to the horror that was unleashed in that bedroom. In 2007, people think that in small towns, the truth eventually rises to the surface like a buoy. But sometimes the circle is so tight, so suffocating, that it holds the truth hostage. There is DNA evidence being looked at. There are avenues still being explored. And I can only hope that those who have the information, those who have been keeping their heads down and their mouths shut, finally find a conscience to speak. Justice is not a gift. It is a duty. And until the truth is fully brought into the light, that duty remains unfulfilled. My, people are strange creatures. They convince themselves that they live in a world where everyone is known, where the walls are thin and the secrets are few. Yet they are often the last to see the predator hunting in their own backyard. You have to be kidding me if you think small towns are safe havens. A small town is just a cage, and sometimes a monster lives right next door, hiding in plain sight behind a mask of indifference. I tell you, it is a bitter pill to swallow when you realize the person who shattered a life was someone who walked among the grieving, watching them tear themselves apart while he kept his own cold, dark counsel. Consider the case of Brittany McGlone, 19 years old, a life just beginning to take shape, full of dreams about nursing school, juggling 2 jobs, burning the candle at both ends because she wanted a future. And on a morning in May 2007, in Winsboro, Texas, that future was extinguished in a room where she thought she was safe. She was in her boyfriend's bed. She was exhausted. She was vulnerable. And somewhere in the dark corners of that small house, a shadow was waiting. You have to be kidding me if you think this was random. Violence like this, the kind that leave a room painted in the victim's own life force, is almost always intimate. It is personal. It is the work of a soul that has long since stopped caring about anything other than the gratification of its own sick impulses. The investigation was a mess of contradictions, a classic case of people protecting their own, or perhaps just being too blind to see the wolf in their midst. You have a boyfriend, Jeff, who claims he was away picking up his grandmother. You have a stepfather vouching for him. You have a timeline that looks solid on paper. But in this line of work, I have learned that if the paperwork looks too perfect, you're likely looking at a stage play. But then you dig deeper into the psyche of the people involved. You look at Chad Carr, a man who, at 25, was lurking in the periphery of a high school romance. A man with a history of striking women with a jackhandle. My, does that sound familiar? The weapon used to end Brittany was likely that same type of tool, a heavy, cold piece of iron used to crush the life out of someone who had done nothing but exist. The victim, Brittany, was just a girl trying to navigate a world that had become increasingly predatory. She told her sister about the abuse she suffered at the hands of her own grandfather, a man who walked through a funeral home asking about the body, as if it were a curiosity rather than his own kin. That is a kind of evil that defies explanation. You look at the victims, and you see their resilience, their attempt to speak up, and then you look at the offenders, and you see nothing but hollow, calculating selfishness. They do not think like you or me. They think in terms of power, control, and the silencing of those who might expose them. Chad Carr spent his life drifting into the spaces of others, leaving trails of blood and trauma. When the police finally brought him in, he did not act surprised. He acted relieved. That is the thing about these people. The tension of the lie is a weight they cannot carry forever. But the justice system, in its infinite bureaucratic wisdom, failed her. A grand jury was not presented with the full picture, and the doors of the courtroom remained closed. A no bill, a technicality that left a family in agony. I tell you, it is enough to make a man lose his faith in everything. But the evidence remains. The DNA in that shower drain, the pattern of violence that spans years. The chilling realization that he never once explicitly denied the crime. He simply danced around it, waiting to see if anyone would ever be brave enough to confront him. The truth does not go away just because the gavel does not drop. It waits in the dark, just like the predator did that morning in Winsboro, waiting for the day when the circle finally breaks and the shadows are forced into the light. My. You see, the thing about small towns is that they're like a pressure cooker. Everyone thinks they know the ingredients, but they never see the rot hidden at the bottom of the pot until the lid blows off. I have spent a lifetime looking into the eyes of people who think they are smarter than the law, and I tell you, they are almost always disappointed. This story begins in a place called Winsboro, Texas, in May of 2007. A 19-year-old girl named Brittany McGlone, a woman with a future she was working hard to secure, is found murdered in the bed of her boyfriend, Jeff Stogner. You have to be kidding me. She does not belong there. It is not her routine. She is a girl of habit, working 2 jobs to save for nursing school, and that day, she broke her own rules. And in the world of homicide investigation, the moment a victim deviates from their pattern, you're looking at the exact point where a predator saw their opportunity. When the investigators walked into that room, they did not find a robbery. Nothing was taken. They found something much more intimate, and that is what makes my blood run cold. They found a crime scene that looked staged, yet somehow lived in. The victim was found in a state of total vulnerability, and there was a killer who had the audacity to use the bathroom, to clean himself up while she lay there lifeless. That is not the act of a panicked stranger. That is the act of someone who feels comfortable, someone who believes they are untouchable. Jeff Stogner and his stepfather claim they were on a road trip to pick up a grandmother, and the surveillance footage of a convenience store stop seems to check out. The police look at him. They look at the weed dealer. They look at the grandfather who had a history of abusing her. But the puzzle pieces just do not lock into place. And then, like a ghost stepping out of the shadows, we have Chad Carr. Chad Carr, a 25-year-old man dating the boyfriend's younger sister. A man with no real connection to the victim. Yet he is the only one who fits the silhouette of a monster. Look at his history. 2001, another woman, another head injury, another weapon, a jack handle. It is the same kind of blunt instrument that likely ended Brittany's life. And that weapon is nowhere to be found. He is a man who knows how to operate in the dark. A man who knows how to move through a house where the doors are never locked. He gave a statement that he never went inside that house, but later he lets it slip that he was in and out of there all the time. He tried to build an alibi with a flurry of stops, a flurry of activity, as if movement alone could mask the smell of death. But the girlfriend, the sister, she smelled it. She smelled the soap. She knew he had showered, and she knew he had no reason to be clean. You want to know about the inner life of such a person? People like Chad Carr do not kill for a reason you or I would understand. They kill for the power of it. They kill to eliminate a witness, to silence a secret, or simply because they enjoy the absolute control they hold over another human being in their final moments. Brittany was a young woman with a bright light, a person who had overcome the darkness of her grandfather's abuse, only to be snuffed out by another shadow she never saw coming. The system failed her. A grand jury was presented with a fragmented picture, and they let a man walk away because the full truth was never put on the table. It is a tragedy of bureaucracy. You have a killer who has demonstrated a pattern of violence against women, a man who has been accused of animal cruelty, a man who essentially told the police they would never find his DNA, yet he remains free. It haunts me, and it should haunt you. Justice is not a gift. It is a pursuit, and when the circle is small, the silence is loud. But silence is not forever. Somewhere, someone knows where that weapon is. Someone knows what happened when the lights went out in that small bedroom. And until they speak, the truth remains trapped, just like that poor girl in Winsboro. It is a cold, hard fact of life that the evilest things often happen in the places that claim to be the safest. My, it is a damn shame. My, you are looking at a story that would make even the most hardened soul pause in the dead of night. It is the story of Brittany McGlone, a 19-year-old girl with her whole life mapped out, cut down in a small town called Winsboro, Texas, where they tell you everybody knows everybody. You have to be kidding me. That is the kind of lie people tell themselves to sleep at night. In truth, the smaller the circle, the easier it is for the monsters to hide in plain sight. I tell you, I have spent a lifetime walking into crime scenes that look like they were pulled straight from the bowels of hell. And the one thing I have learned is that the most dangerous man in the room is rarely the one shouting at the top of his lungs. He is the quiet one, the one blending into the wallpaper, waiting for the right moment to strike. Brittany was a girl who understood the value of hard work, pulling shifts at a distribution center and a discount store, trying to save every cent for nursing school. That is a rare commodity these days. But on that morning in May 2007, she made the mistake of stepping out of her routine. She went to her boyfriend Jeff Stogner's house, a house filled with people, yet a house that became a tomb. When she was found, she was lying in that bed, beaten to death with what looked like a tire iron, a weapon that simply vanished into thin air. Nothing else was out of place. Her belongings, her boots, her innocence. The killer was comfortable. He took a shower. He washed away the blood of a young woman who had dreams, while she lay there cold and silent in a room where she thought she was safe. That is not just a crime. It is an act of utter cold-blooded arrogance. The investigation was a tangled mess of half-truths and convenient alibis. You had the boyfriend, Jeff, who seemed more interested in managing his story than mourning his girlfriend. You had the grandfather, a man whose own dark secrets about sexual abuse cast a long, ugly shadow over the family, though the clock on the wall saved him from being the killer. Then you have the man who should have been a red flag from the start, Chad Carr, a man with a history of hitting women in the head with jack handles, a man who acted erratic and nervous when the police showed up. I tell you, criminals are remarkably unoriginal. They operate in patterns. They think they are clever because they cleaned up, because they waited for a window of time. But they always leave behind the stench of their own depravity. Looking at Chad Carr, you see a man who treated violence like a hobby. When you hear about the attack on the woman, named Debbie years earlier, you realize this was not some random tragedy. This was a man who enjoyed the power of the strike. He was linked to the scene by his proximity, his suspicious timeline, and his history. Yet he walked away. He played the system. He failed a polygraph. And he somehow managed to talk his way through the cracks of justice for 15 long years. It is enough to make you want to throw your badge against the wall. A grand jury was presented with the case in 2022, and they let it slip through their fingers because the full picture was never painted. It is a failure of the highest order. Brittany McGlone was 19. She deserved to be a nurse. She deserved to grow old. Instead, she became a memory, a name on a file, and a weight on the hearts of a family who still waits for someone to tell the truth. I have seen the darkest parts of humanity, and I can tell you that the truth has a funny way of demanding to be heard, no matter how many years it stays buried. The DNA they found in that shower, the DNA that does not belong to anyone in that house, that is the lingering ghost of this investigation. It is waiting for the right person to see it, the right person to stop hiding behind the safety of a small town circle, and finally admit what happened. Because at the end of the day, you can run, you can lie, and you can hide, but you cannot escape the shadow of what you have done. My, the truth is coming. It always does. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, or sometimes for no real reason at all, driven by a dark emptiness inside their souls. I tell you, after decades of looking into the eyes of monsters, nothing surprises me anymore, but it still sickens me. We are dealing with a small town called Winsboro in the state of Texas, a place where everybody thinks they know their neighbor, where life moves slowly, and secrets are buried deep beneath the surface. In a town like that, a 19-year-old girl named Brittany McGlone was just trying to build a life for herself. She was working 2 jobs, spending her nights at a distribution center and her days at discount store, exhausted, running on pure determination because she wanted to save up enough money to go to nursing school and spend her life healing people. Think about the tragedy of that. A young woman full of promise, completely innocent, carrying the heavy, agonizing burden of a horrific secret because she had confided in her sister that her adoptive grandfather, a man named James McGlone, had been sexually abusing her for years. She was surrounded by darkness she did not deserve, yet she kept moving forward. On the morning of May 4th in the year 2007, Brittany broke her usual routine. Instead of going straight to her own home after finishing her grueling overnight shift at 5 the morning, she decided to go to the home of her boyfriend, a 21-year-old named Jeff Stogner. She just wanted a few moments of comfort, a safe place to lay her head before he had to leave to pick up his grandmother. My, the choices we make in life can turn out to be fatal, not because of anything we did wrong, but because evil is patient and evil is watching. Jeff and his stepfather left the house around 9 a.m. to make that long drive, leaving Brittany asleep in the bed. By 3:30 in the afternoon, Jeff returned to a nightmare. He walked into his bedroom and found Brittany completely naked, brutally bludgeoned to death right there in his bed. There was blood cast off on the walls, a terrible scene of absolute ferocity. The weapon, which investigators later believed to be a heavy metal object like a tire iron or crowbar, was nowhere to be found. But what really catches an old detective's eye is what happened after the violence stopped. In the bathroom, there were clear signs that the killer had taken a shower. Think about the psychological profile of a creature like that. Someone who can commit an act of unspeakable brutality and then casually step into a shower, wash the blood off their skin, and compose themselves before walking out into the daylight. That requires a freezing cold demeanor, a complete lack of a human conscience. The killer felt comfortable there. They felt safe. You have to be kidding me if you think this was a random stranger passing through town. This was someone who knew the layout, someone who knew the family did not lock their doors, and someone who knew that young woman was completely alone in that house. Now, the initial suspicion naturally fell upon the boyfriend, Jeff. The mother of the victim never liked him, thought he had a dark personality, and there was a history of a brief breakup, where Brittany had been with someone else. But a good investigator does not rely on feelings. We rely on cold, hard logic. Detectives checked the route of the road trip, pulled the convenience store surveillance footage, and the timestamps matched perfectly. Both Jeff and his stepfather passed their polygraph examinations with flying colors. Then the investigation turned toward the grandfather, James, because a dark motive had just come to light. A predator will kill to keep his ugly secrets quiet, to protect his own skin from the outrage of a community. The fear of exposure is a powerful psychological trigger for a monster. But the record showed he was clocked into work from 7 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon on the very day of the murder. He passed away 2 years later, and he was cleared of the physical act. So, who else knew she was there? There was a local marijuana dealer named Cody who had an arrangement to pick up money hidden under A. Guard didn't know him outside the house, but he passed his polygraph as well. The circle of people who knew Brittany was alone that day was microscopic. And then a name emerged from the shadows. A man who had been easily overlooked because his connection to the victim seemed non-existent. His name was Chad Carr. He was 25 years old, a grown man dating Jeff's teenage sister. On the morning of the murder, around 8:30, he had stopped by the house briefly to pick something up. The stepfather and Jeff explicitly told him not to go inside because Brittany was asleep. Right there, the killer got his piece of vital intelligence. He knew she was isolated. He knew the coast was clear. Let us look deep into the psychology of this individual. Chad Carr was a man with a documented history of opportunistic violence. Years earlier, in the year 2001, he had cornered a woman named Debbie in a small trailer in the middle of the night and struck her in the head with a red jack handle, a tool identical to a tire iron. Why did he do it? Because they were allegedly having an affair, and she was threatening to expose him to his wife. When a narcissist feels their control slipping when they face the threat of consequences, their immediate response is extreme physical aggression. He served time in prison until 2006, and within months of his release, he was accused of assaulting his former wife. He had an insatiable appetite for dominance, a twisted mind that viewed women not as human beings, but as objects to be controlled, used, and discarded. On the afternoon of the murder, when deputies were processing the scene, Chad showed up with his girlfriend and was acting incredibly nervous, shaking and fidgeting so severely that people noticed. When detectives finally questioned him, he offered a hyper-detailed alibi before anyone even accused him, listing every single stop he made that day. I tell you, when a suspect gives you an overly meticulous timeline of their day down to the minute, they are not remembering. They are constructing a shield. He claimed he went home that morning to change his clothes because it was too hot. But the weather reports showed it was a mild Texas morning in the high 60s and low 70s. Why do you change your clothes on a mild morning right after a murder occurs? Because your clothes are covered in the blood of an innocent 19-year-old girl. He claimed he arrived early for an eye doctor appointment at 10 in the morning, but the staff distinctly remembered he arrived late at 10:20 calling ahead with a phony excuse about car trouble. There was a critical window of time between 9:21 in the morning and 10:20 in the morning where he was completely unaccounted for. A window exactly wide enough to drive to that house, commit a horrific crime, wash himself clean in the shower, change his bloody clothes, and drive away. He failed his polygraph examination completely. A subsequent search of his residence turned up a pair of women's underwear in a size 5. The